The champagne glass shattered against marble, not by accident, but on purpose. Elena Ward stood frozen as red wine dripped down her thrift store dress while 200 of the city's elite watched her humiliation unfold. Her coworkers' laughter cut through the ballroom like knives. Then a voice, low, dangerous, absolute, silenced everything. "She's my wife." Elena's head snapped up. The man who'd just claimed her was Lorenzo De Luca, and everyone in that room knew exactly what he was capable of. Her life had just changed forever, and she hadn't even known his name 5 seconds ago. If you want to see how a public lie becomes the most dangerous truth, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The invitation had been a mistake from the beginning. Elena knew it the moment she stepped out of the taxi and saw the red carpet leading into the Grand View Hotel. Crystal chandeliers visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, valets in tailored uniforms, women in gowns that cost more than her yearly rent gliding past like they owned the oxygen itself. She smoothed down her navy dress, the nicest thing she owned, bought 3 years ago for her sister's wedding, and felt the fabric protest under her damp palms. Wrong color, wrong cut, wrong everything. "You coming or what, lady?" The taxi driver's voice snapped her back. Elena paid, over-tipped out of nervousness, and stepped onto the curb. Her heels, borrowed from her roommate, pinched at the toes. She'd practiced walking in them for 20 minutes that afternoon and still felt like a baby deer on ice. The charity gala for St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. Her firm had bought a table. Her boss had made attendance strongly encouraged, which in corporate speak meant mandatory if you ever wanted to see a promotion. So here she was, a mid-level accountant about to spend an evening surrounded by people who made more in bonuses than she did in salary. She could do this. She'd survived worse. The lobby was all white marble and gold accents, the kind of space designed to make you feel small. Elena signed in at the registration table, where a woman with perfect bone structure and a smile sharp enough to cut glass handed her a name tag. "Enjoy your evening," the woman said, her eyes already moving past Elena to someone more important. The ballroom was even worse. Round tables draped in cream linen surrounded a dance floor that gleamed like ice. A live orchestra played something classical and expensive sounding. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably had French names Elena couldn't pronounce. She spotted her table near the back. Not the worst positioning, but definitely not close to the stage where the actual donors sat. Her coworkers were already there. Melissa Chen from marketing held court at one end, her red dress cut low enough to make a statement. Trevor Banks, the senior analyst who thought he was everyone's friend, laughed too loud at something. And there, examining her nails like they were the most fascinating thing in the room, was Vanessa Price. Elena's stomach tightened. Vanessa had started at the firm 6 months after Elena, but had somehow leapfrogged her way into a senior position through a combination of strategic charm and ruthless networking. She was beautiful in that calculated way. Blonde hair always perfectly styled, makeup that looked natural but probably took an hour, clothes that whispered money without screaming it. She also hated Elena for reasons that had never been entirely clear. Maybe because Elena didn't play the game. Maybe because Elena had once corrected Vanessa's numbers in a meeting and made her look bad in front of the CFO. Maybe just because some people needed someone to look down on, and Elena was an easy target. "Oh look, she actually came!" Vanessa's voice carried across the table as Elena approached. "I thought for sure you'd find an excuse." Elena forced a smile. "Wouldn't miss it." Clearly. Vanessa's eyes traveled over Elena's dress, and her smile sharpened. "That's brave." Melissa giggled into her champagne. Trevor at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Elena slid into her seat, focusing on the centerpiece, white roses arranged with some kind of sparkly branches, instead of the heat creeping up her neck. She'd known this would happen, had prepared herself for it, but knowing and experiencing were different things. A waiter appeared at her elbow. "Champagne?" "Yes, thank you." She took the glass and sipped, letting the bubbles ground her. Around the room, conversations hummed with the easy confidence of people who belonged. She recognized faces from the business section of the newspaper. A city councilman, someone who might have been a local news anchor. And then there were people she didn't recognize, but who commanded attention anyway. Men in perfectly tailored suits that probably cost more than her car. Women dripping in diamonds that caught the light with every movement. The kind of people who made the air feel different when they walked past. "Did you see Marcus Brennan is here?" Melissa leaned across the table, her voice dropping to an excited whisper. "The Marcus Brennan. I heard he donated $500,000 tonight." "I heard it was $1 million," Vanessa corrected, because of course she did. "He's at table 3, with the Hartfords and that tech guy who sold his company last year." The conversation devolved into speculation about who was dating whom, who was wearing what designer, who was rumored to be in financial trouble despite appearances. Elena let it wash over her, nodding occasionally, sipping her champagne, and wishing she was literally anywhere else. Dinner was announced. The lights dimmed slightly as everyone found their seats. Elena ended up between Trevor, who spent the entire salad course talking about his new BMW, and an empty chair that apparently belonged to someone important enough to arrive late. The salmon was good. The conversation was not. "So, Elena," Vanessa said during the main course, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant trouble was coming. "Are you still in that apartment in Riverside?" Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Yes. Isn't that area a bit rough?" "It's fine. I just mean, for a single woman living alone. I'd be terrified." Vanessa's concern was about as genuine as her eyelashes. "Have you thought about moving somewhere safer? I know it's more expensive, but you can't put a price on security." Translation: "I know you can't afford anything better." "I like where I live," Elena said evenly. "Of course. I'm sure it has character." Vanessa smiled and turned to Melissa. "Did I tell you I'm looking at condos in Harbor Heights? There's a unit with the most amazing view of the bay." Elena finished her salmon and tried to calculate how much longer she had to stay before she could reasonably claim a headache and escape. Another hour? 2? The plates were cleared. Dessert appeared, some kind of chocolate mousse situation with gold leaf on top. The hospital director took the stage to give a speech about the new pediatric wing and how much the donations meant. People applauded politely while checking their phones. Elena was halfway through her mousse when Vanessa struck again. "Oh, Elena, I meant to ask, how's that Winston account going? I heard there were some complications." Every head at the table turned toward her. Elena set down her spoon carefully. "It's under control." "Are you sure? Because I heard from David that the client was pretty upset about the delay." Vanessa's eyes were wide with fake concern. "I'd be happy to help if you're overwhelmed. I know you've been struggling with the workload lately." "I haven't been struggling." "No, of course not. I just meant that everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in admitting when something's too much for you." Trevor cleared his throat. "I'm sure Elena has it handled, Van." "I'm just trying to be supportive." Vanessa's voice climbed an octave. "We're a team, right? We should support each other." The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. Elena could feel the judgment settling over the table like dust. Vanessa had planted the seed. Elena Ward, the girl who couldn't handle her accounts, who needed help, who was in over her head. It wasn't even true. The Winston account delay had been because the client kept changing requirements, not anything Elena had done wrong. But truth didn't matter in these situations, only perception. Elena excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment away from the table, from Vanessa's smile, from all of it. She locked herself in a stall and pressed her palms against her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Not here. Not over this. She'd survived worse than Vanessa Price. Foster care. Her mother's death when she was 12. Working 3 jobs to put herself through community college. This was nothing. This was just a bad evening with bad people. She could handle it. Elena fixed her makeup, squared her shoulders, and walked back out into the ballroom. The dancing had started. Couples swirled across the floor, while others clustered at the bar or in small groups, networking and social climbing, and doing whatever it was rich people did at these things. She was almost back to the table when someone bumped her from behind. Hard. Elena stumbled forward, her borrowed heels betraying her. Her champagne glass flew from her hand, and she watched in horror as it tumbled through the air in slow motion, the remaining liquid arcing out in a perfect amber wave. Straight onto the white dress of the woman standing 3 feet away. The woman gasped. The champagne spread across silk like a stain on snow. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Elena started forward, hands already reaching for napkins that weren't there. The woman turned, late 50s, diamonds at her throat, and an expression that could freeze oceans. "You spilled champagne on me." "It was an accident. I was bumped. Do you have any idea how much this dress costs?" People were staring now, conversations dying, heads turning. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning." "Cleaning?" The woman's voice rose. "You think this can be cleaned? This is Valentino." Elena's face burned. "I didn't mean to." "She didn't mean to," someone mocked in a high-pitched voice. Laughter rippled through the nearby crowd. Vanessa appeared at Elena's elbow, her face arranged in concern that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Elena, what happened?" "Someone bumped me. You need to be more careful." Vanessa turned to the champagne-soaked woman. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hartford. Elena's not really used to these kinds of events. She doesn't understand how things work, Mrs. Hartford." Elena's stomach dropped. The Hartford family owned half the real estate downtown, and Elena had just ruined her dress. "Clearly," Mrs. Hartford said icily. She plucked at the wet fabric with 2 fingers like it was diseased. "Someone should teach her that these events aren't for everyone." More laughter. Elena caught sight of her reflection in one of the ballroom's mirrors. Face red, dress cheap, completely out of place. Everything they were saying without words was written there. "Maybe she should go," someone suggested from the crowd. "Probably for the best," another voice agreed. Elena's throat closed. She needed to leave, now, before this got worse, before she started crying in front of everyone, before— "Actually," Vanessa said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "I think we should all hear what happened. Elena, why don't you explain to everyone how you're so clumsy you can't even hold a glass without causing damage?" The circle of people tightened, more faces turning, more eyes judging. "It was an accident," Elena managed. "Was it, though?" Vanessa tilted her head. "Because honestly, Elena, this is exactly the kind of attention-seeking behavior I've noticed at the office, too. Making excuses, playing the victim. Never taking responsibility. That's not— You spilled champagne on one of the most important women in this city, and you still can't even apologize properly." Vanessa's voice carried across the ballroom. "This is exactly why some people just shouldn't be allowed at events like this. They don't understand how to behave." Elena's hands were shaking. The room felt too hot, too small, too full of people watching her fall apart. She opened her mouth to respond, to defend herself, to say something, anything. "She's my wife." The voice came from behind her, deep, calm, absolutely certain. The room went silent. Elena turned. The man standing there was tall, dark-haired, and wearing a suit that made everyone else's look like they'd been bought off a rack. But it wasn't the clothes that made people step back. It was something in his presence, the way he stood like he owned not just the room but the building and possibly the entire city block. His eyes were dark, focused entirely on Elena with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Excuse me?" Vanessa's confidence flickered. "I said she's my wife." The man stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Elena in 2 strides. He moved like violence contained in human form, controlled but unmistakable. "And I suggest you think very carefully about your next words." Mrs. Hartford's eyes widened. Lorenzo De Luca. The name rippled through the crowd like an electric shock. People stepped back. Conversation stopped mid-word. Even the orchestra seemed to play quieter. Elena's mind spun. Lorenzo De Luca. She knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name. Real estate mogul, casino owner. The kind of man who appeared in news articles with words like alleged and unconfirmed ties hovering around him like flies around something dangerous. The kind of man who definitely, absolutely, was not her husband. Lorenzo's hand settled on the small of Elena's back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. His touch was possessive, protective, and completely insane. "I don't understand," Mrs. Hartford said, her anger evaporating into confusion. "She's your wife," Lorenzo repeated, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. "Is there a problem?" "No, the champagne was an accident." His gaze swept the crowd, touching on faces that immediately looked away. "Accidents happen. I'm sure you understand." It wasn't a question. Mrs. Hartford swallowed. "Of course, no harm done." "Excellent," Lorenzo's hand pressed slightly against Elena's back, guiding her. If you'll excuse us. He steered her away from the crowd, through the ballroom, past tables full of people who stared with expressions ranging from shock to calculation. Elena's legs moved on autopilot, her brain trying desperately to catch up with what was happening. Lorenzo De Luca just told a room full of the city's elite that she was his wife. Lorenzo De Luca, who she had never met. Lorenzo De Luca, who everyone knew was connected to things that polite society pretended didn't exist. He guided her through a side door into a quiet corridor lined with expensive art and low lighting. The sounds of the gala faded behind them. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. When they were alone, Lorenzo released her and turned to face her fully. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Sharp features, dark eyes that missed nothing, and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow that somehow made him more attractive instead of less. "Thank you," Elena managed, "for that. Back there. You didn't have to." "I know. But why did you—" "Because," Lorenzo said, his voice softer now but no less intense. "I don't like watching people get torn apart for entertainment. And because I meant what I said." Elena blinked. "What?" "You're my wife." He said it like it was simple fact, like he was commenting on the weather. "Or you will be if you're smart." The corridor tilted slightly. "I'm sorry, what?" Lorenzo smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. "Let me be clear. That performance back there? That was them showing you who they think you are. Vanessa Price has been trying to destroy you for months. Tonight was supposed to be the final humiliation. Make you quit. Drive you out." "How do you know about Vanessa?" "I pay attention." His eyes held hers. 3 weeks ago, you stopped outside my restaurant. There was a homeless man sitting on the curb. You gave him your lunch and your coffee, sat with him for 20 minutes while he told you about his daughter." Elena's breath caught. She remembered that day. The man's name was Robert. His daughter lived in Portland. She'd been running late for work, but something in his face had made her stop. "You didn't take a photo," Lorenzo continued. "Didn't post about it online. Just sat with another human being and treated him like he mattered. And then you went to work where people like Vanessa treat you like you don't." "That doesn't explain—" "I've been looking for someone real." Lorenzo stepped closer. "Everyone in my world wears a mask. They smile while planning betrayals. They pretend to care while calculating profit. You sat with a stranger and gave him your food because he was hungry. No cameras, no audience, no agenda. So you decided to claim I'm your wife?" "I decided to offer you a choice." His gaze intensified. "You can walk away right now. Go back to that ballroom, endure whatever else they have planned for you tonight, and return to a life where people like Vanessa Price make you miserable. Or, you can be my wife." Lorenzo's voice was steady, certain. "Not legally, not yet, but publicly. The woman on my arm, the one person in this city no one will ever dare to disrespect again." Elena laughed, the sound sharp with disbelief. "You're insane." "Probably." He didn't look bothered by the assessment. "But I'm also serious. I need someone real in my life. Someone who remembers what it's like to struggle. Someone who treats homeless men with kindness and doesn't demand anything in return. You need protection from people who will never stop trying to tear you down." "This is crazy." "Yes. You don't even know me. I know enough." Lorenzo's hand reached out, fingers brushing her cheek where tears had started to form from the humiliation before he'd appeared. "I know you're stronger than you think, braver than they deserve, and that you've been fighting alone for too long." Elena's throat tightened. "What's in it for you?" "Honestly?" Lorenzo's smile turned rueful. "A chance to stop pretending. Everyone in my world wants something from me. Power, money, connections. You just wanted to make sure a homeless man had food." He paused. "And maybe I want to see what happens when Vanessa Price's face realizes the woman she tried to humiliate is untouchable." Despite everything, the insanity of the situation, the impossibility of what he was suggesting, Elena felt something shift in her chest. For years, she'd been fighting battles she couldn't win, playing by rules designed to keep her losing, accepting humiliation because what choice did she have? And now a man who made the entire city hold its breath was offering her a different option. It was reckless, dangerous, absolutely unhinged. "What would I have to do?" she heard herself ask. Lorenzo's eyes gleamed. Be seen with me. Attend events. Let people believe we're together. And in return, I make sure no one ever treats you the way they did tonight. Not Vanessa, not Mrs. Hartford, no one. That's it? That's it. He extended his hand. We can start tonight. Walk back in there with me. Let them see that the woman they tried to destroy is under my protection, or don't. The choice is yours, Elena Ward. She stared at his hand. This was madness. He was a stranger, a dangerous stranger connected to things she didn't want to think about too carefully. Everything logical said to run, but logic hadn't protected her from Vanessa. Logic hadn't stopped the humiliation. Logic had kept her small and quiet and accepting of treatment she didn't deserve. Maybe it was time to be illogical. Elena placed her hand in his. Lorenzo's fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. His smile was slow, satisfied. Smart choice. I haven't agreed to anything long-term, Elena warned. Just tonight. Tonight is all I need you to commit to right now. He tucked her hand into the crook of his elbow, the gesture old-fashioned and strangely intimate. The rest we'll figure out as we go. They walked back toward the ballroom, and Elena felt the difference immediately. Lorenzo moved through space like he owned it, and by extension, she was under that same umbrella of absolute confidence. People in the corridor saw them coming and stepped aside without being asked. At the ballroom entrance, Lorenzo paused. Last chance to run. Elena thought about Vanessa's smirk, Mrs. Hartford's disgust, the laughter from people who'd probably forget her name by morning, but would remember the humiliation forever. I'm not running. Good. Lorenzo pushed open the doors. The effect was immediate and electric. Every head turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The orchestra stumbled over a note before recovering. Lorenzo guided Elena back toward where the confrontation had happened. Vanessa still stood there, her earlier triumph curdling into uncertainty. Mrs. Hartford hovered nearby, her champagne-stained dress forgotten. Ladies, Lorenzo said pleasantly, I believe there was some confusion earlier. No confusion, Mrs. Hartford said quickly. Just an accident. These things happen. How gracious of you. Lorenzo's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure my wife appreciates your understanding. The word wife landed like a bomb. Elena felt people recalculating everything they'd assumed about her in the past hour. Vanessa's face had gone pale. Lorenzo, I had no idea she was… we worked together and she never mentioned… Why would she? Lorenzo's tone was mild but carried an edge that made Vanessa flinch. My wife doesn't need to justify our relationship to her coworkers. Though I imagine working with you must be challenging, Miss Price. Elena's mentioned how competitive you are. Elena hadn't mentioned Vanessa to anyone, but the lie served its purpose. Vanessa's eyes went wide with the realization that Elena had been talking about her to Lorenzo de Luca. I didn't mean any disrespect, Vanessa backpedaled. We were just concerned because your concern has been noted. Lorenzo's dismissal was absolute. He turned to Elena, his expression softening. Would you like to dance? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Lorenzo led her onto the dance floor. His hand settled at her waist, the other taking hers with surprising gentleness for someone who'd just verbally dismantled Vanessa in 3 sentences. You're shaking, he murmured as they began to move. I've never been at the center of a spectacle before. Get used to it. You're with me now. Lorenzo guided her through a turn. Everyone's watching, trying to figure out who you are and how you managed to catch my attention. Did I catch your attention? His dark eyes held hers. 3 weeks ago, outside my restaurant, you stopped to help a stranger. I watched you from the window, watched you treat him like a person when everyone else walked past like he was invisible. Lorenzo's voice dropped lower. In my world, Elena, kindness is rarer than diamonds, and you gave yours away for free. That doesn't seem like enough reason to claim someone as your wife. Maybe not. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. But it was enough to make me notice you, to look into who you were, to learn about the job that undervalues you and the coworkers who undermine you. And when I saw you standing there tonight, letting them tear you down, I realized something. What? That I was tired of watching from the sidelines. Lorenzo spun her, and Elena's borrowed heels surprisingly cooperated. I could have the best of everything, houses, cars, whatever money can buy, but I can't buy genuine. Can't purchase real. You're the first person in years who's made me want to stop pretending everything is a transaction. The music swelled around them. Elena was aware of eyes tracking their movement, of whispered conversations happening at the edges of the dance floor. This is insane, she said again. Yes. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. His gaze was steady. I want someone who remembers that people matter more than appearances. Someone who hasn't been corrupted by this world yet. I'm not some innocent saint, Elena warned. I'm not going to fix you or save you or whatever fantasy you've built. Lorenzo laughed, the sound genuine and surprising. Good. I don't need saving. I need someone real in my life. Someone who'll tell me when I'm being an asshole. Someone who knows what it's like to fight for every inch of ground. His expression sobered. I can give you protection, power, a life where people like Vanessa Price can't touch you. All I ask in return is that you don't become like them. Stay real. The song ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom, though Elena suspected it was more about them than the orchestra. Lorenzo stepped back but kept hold of her hand. So what do you say, Elena Ward? Are you willing to play this game with me, at least for a while? She should say no, should thank him for the rescue and walk away while she still could. This man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his reputation and everything to do with how he made her feel, seen, valued, protected in a way she'd never experienced. But Vanessa was watching from across the room, her expression caught between fury and fear. Mrs. Hartford had disappeared entirely, and everyone who'd laughed at Elena's humiliation now watched with calculation and respect. One condition, Elena said. Name it. You don't lie to me. Whatever this is, whatever game we're playing, I need to know the rules. I need honesty. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Deal. No lies between us. Starting now. He raised her hand to his lips, the gesture theatrical enough for their audience, but tender enough to feel real. Welcome to my world, wife. The word should have felt wrong, should have scared her. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing to happen all night. The ride to Lorenzo's penthouse was silent, except for the city sounds filtering through the car windows. Elena sat in the back of a black SUV that smelled like leather and money, watching streetlights blur past while her mind tried to catch up with the evening's events. Lorenzo sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body, but not touching. His driver, a broad-shouldered man who hadn't spoken a single word, navigated through downtown traffic with practiced efficiency. You're quiet, Lorenzo said finally. I'm processing. Process out loud. I want to know what you're thinking. Elena turned to look at him. In the dim light of the car, his features were all sharp angles and shadow. I'm thinking that 3 hours ago I was just trying to survive a work event, and now I'm apparently married to a man I don't know. Not married yet, just pretending. Right, because that's so much better. She shook her head. What happens tomorrow? When people start asking questions? When Vanessa tells everyone at the office that I'm some kind of liar? Let her talk. Lorenzo's voice carried absolute certainty. By noon tomorrow, everyone in your office will know exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. Vanessa won't say a word. You can't just threaten people into silence. I won't have to. He smiled slightly. Fear does most of the work for me. I just have to exist. The car pulled up in front of a high-rise that made the Grandview Hotel look modest. The driver opened Lorenzo's door, then circled around to open Elena's. She stepped out onto the curb, craning her neck to see the top of the building disappear into the night sky. You live here? Top 3 floors. Lorenzo placed his hand on the small of her back again, that same possessive gesture from the gala. Come on, we need to talk properly. The lobby was all black marble and modern art that probably cost more than Elena's car. A security guard behind a sleek desk looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from professional to alert when he recognized Lorenzo. Mr. DeLuca, good evening. Marcus. Lorenzo nodded and guided Elena past the desk to a private elevator that required a key card to access. The elevator ride was smooth and silent. Elena watched the floor numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, and tried not to think about how high up they were going. When the doors finally opened, they revealed a foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment. Welcome home, Lorenzo said, stepping out. Elena followed, her borrowed heels clicking on polished hardwood. The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected, and somehow more. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Art on the walls that she recognized from auction catalogs she'd browsed during slow days at work. "This is insane," she breathed. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." She walked toward the windows, drawn by the view. The city spread out below like a galaxy of lights, each one representing lives and stories completely separate from her own. "People don't actually live like this." "I do." Lorenzo moved to a bar cart in the corner and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. "Whiskey?" "I don't drink whiskey." "You do tonight." He crossed to her and pressed a glass into her hand. "You just survived Vanessa Price's attempted assassination. You've earned it." Elena took a sip and immediately regretted it. The whiskey burned all the way down, leaving a trail of fire in her throat. She coughed, eyes watering. Lorenzo's laugh was low and genuine. "Maybe start slower. Maybe warn me next time." She set the glass down on a side table, afraid she'd drop it. "Okay, we're here. You said we needed to talk properly, so talk." Lorenzo studied her for a moment, then nodded. He set his own glass down and gestured to a couch that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. "Sit. This might take a while." Elena sat, tucking her feet under her and immediately regretting it when her pinched toes screamed in protest. She kicked off the borrowed heels and felt instant relief. Lorenzo noticed and smiled. "Uncomfortable?" "They're not mine. My roommates." Elena flexed her toes. "I don't usually wear heels, or go to galas, or pretend to be married to dangerous men." "Dangerous?" Lorenzo settled onto the couch beside her, close but not crowding. "Is that what you think I am?" "I think that's what everyone else thinks you are, and I think they're probably right." "Fair enough." He didn't deny it. "What do you know about me, Elena?" "Just what I've read. Real estate, casinos, some import-export business that the newspapers always mention with words like alleged attached." She met his eyes. "You're connected to things that polite society pretends don't exist." "Very diplomatic way of saying I'm in the mafia." Elena's breath caught. "Are you?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." "No, I don't know." She rubbed her temples. "See, this is exactly the kind of thing I need to understand before I agree to whatever this is. If I'm going to pretend to be your wife, I need to know what I'm getting into." Lorenzo leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "My father built an empire on fear and violence. When he died, I inherited it. The businesses, the connections, the reputation, some of it legitimate, some of it less so. That's not an answer, because it's not a simple question." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look less polished and more human. "I don't kill people if that's what you're asking. I don't run drugs or traffic anything illegal, but I do business with people who aren't always on the right side of the law. I make deals that happen in rooms without windows. I solve problems in ways that don't involve lawyers." "So you're a criminal." "I'm practical." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "In my world, there are rules that have nothing to do with what's written in law books. Debts get paid, agreements get honored, disrespect gets answered, and if you show weakness, someone will exploit it." "And I'm what? A show of strength?" "You're someone real in a world full of masks." He shifted closer, his intensity focused entirely on her. "Everyone in my life wants something: power, money, a piece of whatever I've built. They smile and scheme and wait for me to make a mistake they can exploit. But you sat with a homeless man and gave him your lunch. No cameras, no angle, just kindness." Elena swallowed. "You keep coming back to that." "Because it matters. It tells me who you are when no one's watching. And that's the person I want in my life, Elena. Not a trophy, not a transaction. Someone who remembers what it's like to struggle. Someone who hasn't been corrupted yet." "Yet?" Elena repeated. "You think I will be?" "I think this world changes people. Money, power, access. It's intoxicating. People start believing they're special, that the rules don't apply to them." His expression darkened. "I've seen it happen to people I cared about. They become the very thing they used to hate." "And you want me to what? Keep you honest?" "I want you to stay yourself, no matter what." Lorenzo reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture unexpectedly tender. "In return, I protect you. From Vanessa. From anyone who tries to make you feel small. You'll have resources you've never had before. Security, respect, a life where you don't have to apologize for existing. It was a seductive offer. Elena would be lying if she said part of her wasn't tempted. The thought of never having to endure another humiliation like tonight, of having power instead of being powerless, was intoxicating in itself. "What are the actual logistics?" she asked. "How does this pretend marriage work? You move in here. We're seen together at events, restaurants, anywhere public. People believe we're together. After a reasonable amount of time, we make it official if that's what you want. Or we don't. Your choice." "I have to move in?" "People will expect it, and it's safer." At her alarmed look, he added, "Separate bedroom, complete privacy. This place is big enough that we can go days without seeing each other if you want." Elena looked around the penthouse again. It was beautiful, luxurious, and completely alien to everything she knew. Her apartment in Riverside was small, worn, and required 3 deadbolts on the door. But it was hers. "I need to think about it." "Take all the time you need." Lorenzo stood and extended his hand. "Let me show you the guest room. You can stay tonight. Decide in the morning." She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her stockinged feet were silent on the hardwood as she followed him down a hallway lined with more expensive art. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was bigger than her entire apartment. The bed was enormous, covered in linens that looked like they cost more than her monthly rent. Another wall of windows offered another angle of the city view. There was a sitting area with its own fireplace and a door that presumably led to a bathroom. "This is the guest room?" Elena's voice came out higher than intended. "You should see the master suite." Lorenzo leaned against the door frame, watching her take it all in. "There are clothes in the closet, different sizes. One of them should fit. Bathroom through that door has everything you need." "You just keep women's clothes in your guest room?" "I keep options available for situations exactly like this." He smiled at her expression. "I'm not in the habit of bringing women home, if that's what you're worried about. But when I decided I wanted you in my life, I prepared." "That's either very thoughtful or very creepy." "Probably both." He pushed off the doorframe. "Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning." "Lorenzo?" He paused, turning back. "Why me?" "Really? There are thousands of women in this city who would kill for what you're offering. Why pick the one who spilled champagne and got humiliated?" Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes holding hers. "Because everyone else would kill for it. You're just trying to survive. That's the difference." He closed the door before she could respond. Elena stood in the middle of the guest room and tried to process everything. This morning, she'd woken up in her tiny apartment, dreading the gala, but thinking it would just be another uncomfortable evening with her coworkers. Now she was standing in a penthouse that probably cost more than she'd make in her lifetime, wearing borrowed heels and a cheap dress, pretending to be the wife of a man who was either her salvation or her destruction. She should leave, should thank Lorenzo for the rescue, call an Uber, and go back to her real life where things made sense. Instead, she walked to the closet. It was full of clothes, just like he'd said. Dresses, casual wear, even pajamas, all with tags still attached. Different sizes, different styles, like he'd bought out half a department store just to cover his bases. Elena pulled out a pair of silk pajamas in her size and changed, folding her navy dress carefully, even though part of her wanted to throw it in the trash. In the bathroom, which was indeed bigger than her bedroom at home, she washed off her makeup and stared at her reflection. She looked tired, overwhelmed, but also something else. There was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there this morning, something that looked almost like hope. Sleep didn't come easily. Elena lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the penthouse. Air conditioning cycling on. The distant hum of the city 40-something floors below. And underneath it all, the awareness that Lorenzo was somewhere in this sprawling space, probably not sleeping either. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were full of champagne stains and dark eyes, and the feeling of being seen for the first time in years. Morning came with sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena woke disoriented, taking several seconds to remember where she was. The guest room looked different in daylight, still luxurious but less intimidating. She found her phone in her purse, which someone had thoughtfully placed on the nightstand. 7 missed calls from her roommate. 12 texts, 3 voicemails. The texts ranged from concerned to panicked to excited. Apparently, photos from the gala had already made it onto social media. Elena, scrolling through her roommate's messages, found links to Instagram posts and gossip blogs, all featuring variations of the same image. Her and Lorenzo on the dance floor, his hand at her waist, looking at each other like they were the only 2 people in the room. The captions ranged from, "Who is she?" to Lorenzo De Luca's mystery wife, to more elaborate conspiracy theories about secret marriages and hidden romances. Elena's stomach knotted. This was real. People believed it. By now, everyone at her office would have seen the photos. Vanessa would be losing her mind. A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, pulling the covers up even though the silk pajamas were more modest than most of her regular clothes. Lorenzo entered carrying a tray. He was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, looking unfairly good for someone who probably slept as little as she did. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. "Breakfast," he announced, setting the tray on the bed. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made options." Elena stared at the tray. Eggs, toast, fruit, coffee, orange juice, and what looked like homemade pastries. "You made this?" "Don't sound so surprised. I know how to cook. Mafia bosses don't usually cook their own breakfast. I'm full of surprises." He settled into a chair near the bed, giving her space. "Sleep okay?" Eventually, Elena picked up the coffee, grateful for something to do with her hands. "My phone's been exploding. We're all over social media." "I know. Good." "Good? The more public this is, the more real it becomes. By now, everyone knows you're under my protection. Vanessa won't touch you. Your boss will think twice before undervaluing you." "You're not invisible anymore, Elena." She sipped the coffee. It was perfect, exactly the right amount of cream and sugar, even though she'd never told him how she took it. "You researched me." "I pay attention," he corrected. There's a difference." "It's still creepy." "Probably." He didn't look bothered. "Have you decided?" Elena set down the coffee cup. "I have questions first." "Ask." "What happens if I say yes and then change my mind? Can I leave?" "Anytime you want. I'm not holding you prisoner." Lorenzo's expression was serious. "This only works if you choose it. The second you don't want this anymore, you walk away. No consequences." "What about your reputation? If we break up, people will talk." "Let them talk. I've survived worse than gossip." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What else?" "The physical stuff. How far does this pretend relationship go?" "As far as you're comfortable. We need to look convincing in public. Hand-holding, dancing, maybe a kiss or two for the cameras. But behind closed doors, nothing happens unless you want it to." Elena studied his face, looking for the lie. She didn't find one. "You'd really be okay with a celibate arrangement?" "I'd be okay with whatever arrangement keeps you here." Lorenzo's voice dropped lower. "I'm not doing this for sex, Elena. I can get that anywhere. I'm doing this because you're the first person in years who's made me feel like I might still be human underneath all this." The vulnerability in his words caught her off guard. This wasn't the commanding presence from the gala or the calculated businessman. This was someone who was just as lonely as she was, just better at hiding it. "One more question." "Anything." "What happens if one of us actually develops feelings? Real ones, not just pretend?" Lorenzo's eyes darkened. "Then we deal with it honestly. No lies, remember? That was your condition." "Right. No lies." Elena took a breath and made her decision. "Okay, I'll do it." Something fierce and satisfied flashed across Lorenzo's face. "Yeah? Yeah, but we're doing this my way too. I'm not quitting my job. I'm not cutting off my friends. I'm still me, just with better security and fewer people treating me like garbage. Deal." He stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. De Luca." Elena shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his grip, the calluses that suggested he didn't just sit behind a desk all day. "I'm keeping my last name. For now." His smile was slow and devastating. "We'll see." The next few days were a blur of changes that made Elena's head spin. Lorenzo sent people to her apartment to pack her things. Professional movers who treated her secondhand furniture like it was made of gold. Her roommate had been shocked, excited, and slightly terrified when Elena explained what was happening. You're moving in with Lorenzo De Luca, Michelle had said, staring at Elena like she'd grown a second head. The Lorenzo De Luca, the guy who owns half the city and probably has bodies buried somewhere. He doesn't have bodies buried, Elena had replied, though she wasn't entirely certain. How do you know? I asked. And you believed him? Elena had paused. Yeah, I did. Moving into the penthouse was surreal. Her entire life fit into 6 boxes, which looked pathetic sitting in the middle of Lorenzo's massive living room. He'd given her a bedroom that was technically the second master suite, complete with its own bathroom, walk-in closet, and sitting area. This is bigger than my old apartment, Elena had said, staring around in disbelief. It's yours now. Do whatever you want with it. Lorenzo had leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore. Decorate it. Paint the walls purple. I don't care. Make it feel like home. Home. The word felt foreign in a place this expensive. Work was its own kind of surreal. Elena had returned to the office on Monday expecting whispers and stares, and she'd gotten them. But they were different than before. Instead of dismissive, they were calculating, respectful, almost afraid. Vanessa had been notably silent. She'd walked past Elena's desk without a word, her expression carefully neutral. But Elena had caught her staring more than once, her eyes full of questions and barely suppressed rage. It was Trevor who finally broke the ice. So, he'd said, appearing at Elena's desk with coffee and a nervous smile. You're married to Lorenzo De Luca. Apparently. How long has that been a thing? A while, Elena had lied smoothly, surprising herself with how easy it was. We kept it quiet. Right. Quiet. Trevor had nodded too enthusiastically. That makes sense, privacy and all that. Listen, if you ever want to grab lunch and catch up, I'd love to hear about... if you're comfortable sharing, I'll think about it, Trevor. He'd practically run back to his desk. The shift in power was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. People who'd ignored her for years suddenly wanted her attention. Her boss had stopped by her desk personally to ask if she needed any additional resources for her projects. Even Mrs. Hartford from the gala had sent a handwritten apology note about the champagne incident. Elena kept the note in her desk drawer as a reminder that this was real. She really was living this strange new life. Evenings in the penthouse fell into an unexpected rhythm. Lorenzo worked late most nights, disappearing into his home office for hours. When he emerged, usually around 9 or 10, they'd have dinner together. Sometimes he cooked, sometimes they ordered in. They talked about nothing important, books, movies, the news, carefully avoiding anything too personal. It felt like they were circling each other, two wary animals trying to figure out if the other was safe. A week after Elena moved in, Lorenzo came home with a small velvet box. What's this? Elena asked, looking up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing spreadsheets. Open it. She did. Inside was a ring. Not an engagement ring. The stone was deep blue instead of diamond, set in white gold with smaller stones circling it. It was beautiful and obviously expensive and made her hands shake slightly as she lifted it from the box. We need to look the part, Lorenzo said quietly. People are asking questions about why you're not wearing a ring. This is... Elena couldn't find words. Sapphire. Your birthstone. September, right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He'd remembered her birthday from whatever research he'd done. Had chosen a ring that was personal, not just expensive. Let me. Lorenzo took the ring and slid it onto her left hand. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Elena stared at the ring catching the light, feeling the weight of it. This feels real. It can be, if you want it to be. Lorenzo's thumb brushed over her knuckles. Or it stays pretend. Your choice. She looked up at him, at the intensity in his dark eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. Something dangerous and warm and absolutely terrifying. I don't know what I want, she admitted. That's okay. We have time. He released her hand but didn't step away. There's an event this weekend. Art gallery opening. A lot of important people will be there. I need you with me. Another gala? Smaller, more intimate, but yes. His expression turned wry. Think you can handle more champagne and judgment? Elena looked at her ring, thought about Vanessa's face when she'd seen the social media posts, remembered what it felt like to be protected instead of torn apart. I can handle it. Good. Because this time, you're not the girl who doesn't belong. Lorenzo's smile was sharp and satisfied. You're my wife, and everyone there will know exactly what that means. The first threat came on a Tuesday. Elena was at her desk, 3 weeks into what the city now called the most unexpected marriage of the decade, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She'd gotten used to those. Reporters, curious socialites, even a few marriage proposals from men who apparently thought Lorenzo's wife might be looking for options. She usually deleted them without reading. This one was different. Pretty girls make such easy targets. Elena's coffee went cold in her hand. She stared at the screen, reading the words again. Then a second message appeared. Does he know you take the same route home every night? Walk alone from the parking garage? So trusting. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She looked around the office, Vanessa at her desk pretending to work while watching Elena from the corner of her eye, Trevor on a phone call, Melissa typing frantically at her keyboard. Normal Tuesday morning. Except nothing had been normal since the gala. Elena's fingers shook as she forwarded the messages to Lorenzo. She'd gotten his private number that first night, along with instructions that she could call him any time for any reason, no questions asked. She hadn't used it yet, hadn't wanted to seem needy or scared or like she was taking advantage of their arrangement, but those messages weren't casual curiosity. They were surveillance, threat. Her phone rang 30 seconds later. Where are you? Lorenzo's voice was clipped, controlled in a way that made Elena's stomach drop. At work. My office. Stay there. Don't go anywhere alone, not even the bathroom. I'm sending someone. Lorenzo, it's probably nothing. It's not nothing. Background noise suggested he was moving, car doors slamming. Someone's watching you, Elena. They know your routine. That means they've been following you for days at least. The coffee cup trembled in her grip. Who would... I have enemies. A lot of them. And now you're connected to me, which makes you a target. His voice softened slightly. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this sooner. You can't control what other people do. I can control how protected you are. Marco will be there in 10 minutes. He'll stay with you until I arrive. I have work. Elena. Lorenzo's tone left no room for argument. This isn't optional. Someone threatened you. They're watching you. Until I know who and why, you don't move without security. The call ended. Elena sat frozen, staring at her phone, the office suddenly feeling too exposed, windows overlooking the street, multiple exits, dozens of people who could walk in at any time. Vanessa appeared at her cubicle entrance, all fake concern. Everything okay? You look pale. Fine, Elena managed. Are you sure? Because you've seemed really stressed lately. Vanessa's smile was sharp. Must be hard keeping up with Lorenzo's lifestyle. All those events, all those expectations. Not really your world, is it? Elena had learned in 3 weeks that responding to Vanessa only fed her. I need to make a call. Excuse me. She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the conference room. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. Someone was watching her, following her, knew where she parked, how she walked home. The conference room was empty. Elena locked the door and sat down, willing her hands to stop shaking. This was real. Whatever game she and Lorenzo were playing had just turned dangerous. 10 minutes later, her desk phone rang with reception. Miss Ward, there's a Marco Rinaldi here to see you. Elena had never seen anyone less suited for an office building than Marco Rinaldi. He was built like a wall, 6'4", shoulders that barely fit through doorways, and an expression that suggested he'd seen things that would make normal people quit sleeping. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary, but it didn't make him look corporate. It made him look like violence in expensive fabric. Ms. Ward, his voice was surprisingly soft. Mr. DeLuca sent me. I'll be accompanying you for the rest of the day. Every head in the office turned. Vanessa's jaw actually dropped. I appreciate that, Elena said quietly, but I have work to do. I understand. I'll wait. Marco positioned himself near her cubicle with the patience of someone who could stand still for hours without complaint. Elena tried to focus on spreadsheets. Failed. Tried to respond to emails. Failed at that too. Her mind kept circling back to those messages, to the fact that someone had been watching her, learning her patterns, waiting for the right moment to strike. The morning crawled past. Marco stood silent as a statue, occasionally checking his phone but mostly just existing as an immovable presence. Other employees found reasons to walk past Elena's desk, curiosity winning over professionalism. At 11:30, Lorenzo arrived. He moved through the office like a storm system, Marco falling into step behind him. Elena's boss actually came out of his office, hand extended for a handshake that Lorenzo accepted with barely concealed impatience. "Mr. DeLuca, what a pleasure. I'm here for my wife." Lorenzo's eyes found Elena across the room. "We have a lunch appointment." It wasn't a question. Elena grabbed her purse and stood, relief and anxiety warring in her chest. Lorenzo's hand settled at her lower back as they walked out. That now familiar touch, both possessive and protective. They didn't speak until they were in his car, a black Mercedes that screamed money and power, with Marco in the front seat and privacy glass raised. "I found out who sent the messages," Lorenzo said without preamble. Elena's stomach clenched. "Who?" "Victor Castellano." Lorenzo's jaw was tight. "He runs the drug trade in the East District. We've had disagreements about territory." "Drug trade," Elena repeated faintly. "I don't deal in drugs. Never have. But I own clubs and restaurants, and Castellano wanted to use them for distribution. I refused. He's been looking for leverage ever since." Lorenzo's hand found hers. "And now I've given it to him. You." The city slid past outside the window. Elena felt like she was falling even though she was sitting perfectly still. "What does he want?" "To scare me. Make me understand that nothing I care about is safe." Lorenzo's grip tightened. "He won't touch you. I won't let that happen. But we need to change things." "What kind of things?" "You can't live alone anymore. Can't walk around unprotected. Can't be predictable." He turned to face her fully. "I know we agreed this was temporary, just for appearances, but circumstances have changed." Elena's throat was dry. "What are you saying?" "Move in with me." Lorenzo said it like it was simple, logical, the only reasonable option. "My penthouse has security that would make a bank jealous. Armed guards, cameras, nothing gets in or out without me knowing about it. You'll be safe there." "That's crazy." "Crazier than a drug dealer threatening you because you helped me save face at a gala?" Lorenzo's smile was bitter. "This is my fault, Elena. I pulled you into my world without thinking through the consequences. Let me fix it." "By having me move into your apartment like we're actually married?" "Yes." No hesitation. "It's the only way I can guarantee your safety. And before you argue, consider the alternative. You go back to your apartment. Castellano's men are watching. Maybe they just watch. Maybe they decide watching isn't enough. Maybe you're walking home one night and a car pulls up and..." "Stop!" Elena's voice cracked. Lorenzo gentled immediately. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to scare you because you should be scared. This man is dangerous. He doesn't care about rules or innocence or anything except making me bleed, and the fastest way to make me bleed is through you." The car pulled up to a restaurant Elena recognized from magazine spreads. The kind of place that required reservations months in advance and where appetizers cost more than her grocery budget. Lorenzo helped her out, his hand never leaving the small of her back. Inside, they were led to a private dining room. Just them, no other diners, with Marco stationed outside the door. Elena sat down across from Lorenzo, her mind spinning. "This is insane." "I know. 3 weeks ago, I was nobody. Now drug dealers are threatening me because I'm pretending to be your wife." "You're not pretending anymore." Lorenzo leaned forward. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. This stopped being pretend the moment Castellano learned your name. To him, to everyone in my world, you are my wife. Which means you're either protected like my wife or you're vulnerable like a stranger I'm using for cover. And moving in makes me protected? Moving in makes you untouchable." Lorenzo's eyes were dark, intense. "No one will risk coming after you if they know you're under my roof, in my territory, with my security surrounding you 24/7. It's the difference between a target and a fortress." A waiter appeared with water and menus. Elena stared at hers without seeing the words. Everything was in French. She had no idea what any of it meant. "The sea bass is excellent," Lorenzo offered quietly. "So is the chicken." "I don't care about food right now." "I know, but you need to eat, and we need to talk about logistics." Elena set down her menu. "What if I say no? What if I don't move in?" Lorenzo's expression went carefully blank. Then I assign you round-the-clock security at your apartment. You don't go anywhere without guards. Your life becomes a cage, but at least it's a cage you chose. That's not really a choice. No, he agreed. It's not. I wish I could offer you something better, but this is the reality of being connected to me. Safety or freedom. You can't have both. The waiter returned. Lorenzo ordered for both of them, sea bass for her, steak for himself, without asking. Normally, Elena would have bristled at the presumption. Right now, she didn't have the energy. When they were alone again, Lorenzo pulled out his phone and showed her photos. A penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Modern kitchen with marble countertops. Guest bedroom that looked bigger than Elena's entire apartment. This would be yours, he said, pointing to the guest room. Your own space, separate from mine. You'd have privacy, your own bathroom, a lock on the door if you want it. You've really thought this through. I spent the morning making arrangements. Lorenzo pocketed his phone. I also called your landlord. He's willing to let you out of your lease early given the circumstances. Your things can be moved this afternoon if you agree. Elena laughed, the sound sharp with disbelief. This afternoon? You're not wasting any time. I can't afford to. Every hour you're vulnerable is an hour Castellano might act. Lorenzo reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I know this is fast. I know you didn't sign up for any of this, but I'm trying to protect you, Elena. That's all I care about right now. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. You barely know me. We've seen each other maybe 5 times since the gala. Why do you care this much? Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her knuckles. Do you remember what you said that night, when I asked you to be my wife? I said a lot of things. You said no lies, that you needed honesty or the deal was off. His eyes met hers. So here's the truth. I've spent 10 years building an empire, making money, gaining power, crushing anyone who got in my way. And somewhere in there I forgot what it felt like to care about something that wasn't a transaction. I don't understand. You sat with a homeless man and gave him your lunch. Lorenzo's voice was rough. No cameras, no witnesses, no benefit to you at all. You just saw someone hurting and decided to help. That's not how my world works. People don't help unless they're getting something, don't care unless there's profit. And then I saw you do this thing that was so simple and so rare, and I realized I'd forgotten people like you existed. Elena's throat tightened. I'm not special. You just treated someone like they mattered when everyone else walked past. You stood there tonight at the gala and took abuse from people who should have been beneath you. And when I offered you a way out, you asked for honesty instead of money. Lorenzo's grip tightened. So yes, I barely know you. But what I do know tells me you're worth protecting, worth keeping safe, even if it means turning your life upside down. The food arrived. Elena stared at her sea bass without appetite. What about your life? She asked quietly. Having me move in isn't exactly convenient for you either. Lorenzo smiled slightly. I live alone in a penthouse with 10 rooms. I have a housekeeper who comes twice a week and a cook I barely see. You being there wouldn't inconvenience me, Elena. It would make the place feel less like a museum and more like a home. We'd be living together, actually living together, not just pretending. Yes. And when this is over? When Castellano isn't a threat anymore, or when you get tired of the arrangement, what happens then? Lorenzo cut into his steak with more force than necessary. Then you have options. You can stay if you want. Leave if you don't. I won't hold you hostage. This isn't about trapping you. Just protecting me. Just protecting you, he echoed. Elena pushed sea bass around her plate. 3 weeks ago, she'd been invisible, drowning in debt and workplace politics, wondering if life would ever get better. Now she was sitting in a private dining room with a man who terrified half the city, discussing moving into his penthouse because drug dealers were threatening her. It was absurd, impossible, completely insane, and somehow the safest she'd felt in years. Okay, she heard herself say. Lorenzo's head snapped up. Okay, I'll move in, temporarily, until this situation is resolved. Elena met his eyes. But we need ground rules. Name them. My own room, my own space. You don't get to control my schedule or tell me where I can go. She paused. And we tell each other the truth about everything, even the ugly stuff. Agreed. Lorenzo's relief was visible. Anything else? If I want to leave for any reason, you let me go. No arguments, no convincing, just let me walk away. Something flickered across Lorenzo's expression, too fast to identify. If that's what you want, that's what I need. Elena finally took a bite of sea bass. It was excellent, and she barely tasted it. When do we do this? Marco is already coordinating with a moving company. They'll pack your apartment this afternoon. You can be moved in by tonight. Lorenzo's business mode kicked back in. I'll have my assistant arrange for your mail forwarding, utilities cancellation, all the logistics. You just need to tell me what you want to keep and what you want to put in storage. That fast. That fast. Lorenzo's expression softened. I know it's overwhelming, but the sooner you're secure, the sooner I can breathe. They finished lunch in relative silence, the weight of the decision settling over both of them. When they were done, Lorenzo paid. Elena didn't even see the bill, and they headed back to the car. I need to go to my apartment, Elena said. Pack things. Say goodbye. Marco will take you. I have a meeting I can't cancel, but he'll stay with you the entire time. Lorenzo hesitated at the car door. Elena, I promise you're doing the right thing. I won't let anything happen to you. You can't promise that. Watch me. The intensity in his voice made Elena shiver. This man had built an empire on promises kept and threats fulfilled. If he said she'd be safe, he meant it with everything he had. Marco drove her to her apartment building, a 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Elena had lived here for 2 years, and it had been fine, safe enough, cheap enough. Nothing special but hers. Now she saw it through different eyes. No security. Easy access. Ground floor windows that wouldn't keep out anyone determined to get in. How had she ever felt safe here? Her apartment was small. Studio with a kitchen alcove and bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But she'd made it work. Plants on the windowsill, photographs on the walls, books stacked on every available surface. How long do I have? She asked Marco. Moving crew will be here in an hour. Pack what you want to keep close. They'll box everything else. Elena grabbed a suitcase and started making decisions. Clothes, obviously. Toiletries, her laptop, photo albums. One of the few things from her childhood she'd managed to keep through multiple moves. Her mother's necklace, costume jewelry, worth nothing but priceless to Elena. She was folding her favorite sweater when her phone rang. Unknown number again. Don't answer it, Marco said immediately. But Elena had already hit accept. Hello? Heavy breathing. Then a voice, male, rough with an accent she couldn't place. You think you're safe with him? Elena's hand froze. Who is this? He can't protect you all the time. Can't watch you every second. Eventually you'll be alone. And when you are, the breathing grew heavier. I'm going to enjoy watching you realize how wrong you were. The line went dead. Elena stood paralyzed, phone still pressed to her ear, the voice echoing in her head. Marco was already on his own phone, talking rapid fire in Italian to someone Elena assumed was Lorenzo. Minutes later, her phone rang again. Lorenzo this time. Are you hurt? No, just, he called me, threatened me. I know, Marco told me. Lorenzo's voice was ice. Pack faster. I want you out of there in 30 minutes. The movers will handle everything. You don't need to be there. Background noise, car engine revving. I'm coming to get you myself. You said you had a meeting. Nothing is more important than this, than you. Lorenzo's control was fracturing, real fear bleeding through. Just stay with Marco and pack what matters. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The movers arrived 15 minutes later. 4 men who worked with military efficiency, not asking questions, just boxing everything in sight. Elena shoved her essentials into 2 suitcases and a backpack, trying not to think about the voice on the phone, the breathing, the promise of violence waiting for its moment. Lorenzo arrived 18 minutes after hanging up, moving through her apartment like he was memorizing every exit, every window, every possible threat. His eyes found Elena immediately. You're okay. It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded anyway. I'm fine. You're not fine. Someone called and threatened you in your own home. Lorenzo's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. But you will be. I promise you'll be fine. They left 20 minutes later, the movers still packing, Marco coordinating the logistics. Elena took one last look at her apartment. the first place she'd lived alone, the first space that had been entirely hers, and felt something twist in her chest. "Goodbye," she whispered. Lorenzo's hand found hers. "You're not losing anything, just changing locations." "Feels like more than that." "I know." His fingers tightened around hers. "But I've got you. Whatever comes next, you're not alone anymore." The penthouse was everything the photos had promised, and nothing Elena was prepared for. 32nd floor, views that stretched to the horizon, furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. It was beautiful and cold and utterly intimidating. "Your room is this way," Lorenzo said, leading her down a hallway lined with modern art. The guest bedroom was bigger than her entire apartment had been. King-sized bed with white linens, sitting area with a couch and reading chair. Walk-in closet that echoed when she stepped inside. Bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in. "This is too much," Elena breathed. "This is secure." Lorenzo set her suitcases on the luggage rack. "And it's yours for as long as you need it." Elena turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you for all of this." "Don't thank me. This is my fault." "It's Castellano's fault. It's my fault for dragging you into my world without thinking through the consequences." Lorenzo moved closer, and Elena's breath caught. "But I'm going to make this right. I'm going to end this threat. And I'm going to make sure you're safe." "How?" Lorenzo's smile was dangerous. "By reminding Victor Castellano why people are afraid of me." He left her to unpack, and Elena sat on the edge of the enormous bed, trying to process the past 12 hours. This morning she'd been worried about quarterly reports. Now she was living in a penthouse, threatened by drug dealers, protected by a man who'd claimed her as his wife on a whim, and was treating that claim like a blood oath. Her phone buzzed. Text from her roommate. "Moving guys just showed up at your place? WTF is happening?" Elena stared at the message. What could she possibly say that would make sense? "Sorry, moved in with the Mafia Boss I married 3 weeks ago because drug dealers are threatening me." "Talk soon?" She typed back. "Long story, I'm safe. We'll explain later." Not great, but better than nothing. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The bed was too comfortable, the room too quiet, everything too surreal. She got up around midnight and wandered toward the kitchen, hoping tea might help. Lorenzo was there, sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of whiskey and his phone, looking at something that made his expression grim. "Couldn't sleep either?" Elena asked. He looked up, and something softened in his face. "Not when I'm this angry." "At Castellano?" "At myself." Lorenzo set down his phone. "You should be in your apartment, living your life, not hiding in my penthouse because I made you a target." Elena poured herself water from the refrigerator, some fancy filtered thing, and leaned against the counter. "You also saved me from humiliation, gave me protection I desperately needed, and offered me a place to stay when my safety was compromised. So, maybe be angry at yourself a little less?" Lorenzo's smile was tired. "You're being generous." "I'm being honest, which is what we agreed on, right?" Elena sipped her water. "What are you going to do about Castellano?" "End him," said simply, like discussing the weather. "He threatened what's mine. There are consequences for that." "I'm not yours." "Aren't you?" Lorenzo's eyes held hers. "You're living in my home, under my protection. Everyone in this city thinks you're my wife. At what point does the pretense become reality, Elena?" Her heart hammered. "We had a deal. Temporary arrangement until the threat passes. And what if I don't want it to be temporary anymore?" Lorenzo stood, moving around the island toward her. "What if I've realized that having you here, knowing you're safe, being able to talk to you at midnight when I can't sleep, what if that's become more important than any deal we made?" Elena's back hit the counter. "Lorenzo, I'm not pressuring you. I'm being honest, like we promised." He stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "You asked me why I care. The truth is, I'm not entirely sure myself. But somewhere between that gala and tonight, you stopped being a stranger I was protecting and became someone I don't want to lose. You barely know me. I know you gave your lunch to a homeless man. I know you stood up to Vanessa even when you were terrified. I know you asked for honesty instead of money. I know you're brave and kind and real in a way I'd forgotten people could be." His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. And I know that the thought of Castellano's men touching you makes me want to burn the entire city down. Elena's breath caught. That's not healthy. Probably not. Lorenzo's thumb traced her jawline. But it's true. They stood there inches apart, the city glittering beyond the windows. Elena should step away, should remind him this was temporary, should protect herself from getting attached to a man whose world included drug dealers and threats and violence as casual business. Instead, she leaned into his touch. I'm scared, she whispered. Of Castellano? Of you. Elena met his eyes. Of how safe I feel when I shouldn't. Of how much I want to trust you even though I know better. Lorenzo's expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through. I'm scared too. Of failing you. Of getting you hurt because I was selfish enough to want you in my life. His forehead touched hers. But I'm more scared of losing you than anything Castellano could do to me. This is insane. I know. We're going to mess this up. Probably. Lorenzo's smile was sad. But at least we'll mess it up honestly. Elena laughed despite everything, and Lorenzo kissed her. It wasn't gentle or careful. It was desperate and real, and tasted like fear and whiskey, and 3 weeks of pretending they were something they weren't until the pretense became truth. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Lorenzo made a sound low in his throat that sent heat through her entire body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers again. I love you, he said quietly. I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy. But if Castellano taught me anything tonight, it's that I don't want to waste time pretending I don't care when I do. Elena's throat closed. Lorenzo, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know, before things get worse, before I have to do what I'm about to do. His hands framed her face. I love you, Elena Ward, and I'm going to keep you safe even if it costs me everything. Tears burned behind Elena's eyes. What are you about to do? What I should have done 3 weeks ago. Lorenzo kissed her forehead, gentle this time. I'm going to end this war before it takes you from me. He stepped back and the moment shattered. The vulnerability disappeared behind the cold mask of the man who ran half this city's underground. The man who people feared for good reason. Get some sleep, Lorenzo said. Tomorrow, things are going to change. He walked away, leaving Elena alone in the kitchen with her racing heart and the taste of him still on her lips. She didn't sleep that night, and when morning came, she understood why Lorenzo had looked so grim, because tomorrow had arrived, and with it, war. Elena woke to silence. Not the comfortable kind, the wrong kind, the kind that made her sit up too fast, heart already racing before her brain caught up. The penthouse felt empty in a way it hadn't the night before, when Lorenzo's presence had filled every corner even when he wasn't in the room. She grabbed her phone. 6:42 in the morning, 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize, no messages from Lorenzo. The kitchen was empty when she got there. No coffee brewing, no signs of breakfast, no Lorenzo sitting at the island with his whiskey and his grim expression. Just sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and a note on the counter in handwriting she was starting to recognize. Had to handle something. Marco is downstairs if you need anything. Stay inside, please. L. Elena stared at the word please like it was written in a foreign language. Lorenzo didn't strike her as someone who said please very often, which meant whatever he was handling was bad enough to scare him into politeness. She made coffee because her hands needed something to do. Burned her tongue on the first sip because she wasn't paying attention. Tried to eat toast and gave up after 2 bites. Her phone rang. The unknown number again. This time she didn't hesitate. What do you want? Good morning to you too. The voice was different from yesterday's caller. Smoother, educated, almost friendly, which somehow made it worse. I take it you moved in with your husband. Smart girl. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? Someone who wants to make sure you understand the situation you're in. A pause. Lorenzo De Luca is a violent man, Miss Ward. I'm sure he's been very charming with you, very protective. But do you know what he did to the last person who crossed him? I don't care. You should, because that person ended up in the river with concrete shoes. Very old-fashioned, I know, but Lorenzo appreciates tradition. The voice remained pleasant, conversational. And now here you are, living with a man who solves his problems with murder, thinking you're safe because he calls you his wife. Elena's stomach turned. If you're trying to scare me, I'm trying to save you. Lorenzo is using you as a shield. As long as you're with him, I can't touch him without risking collateral damage. But the moment you're not useful anymore, the friendliness dropped away. You'll be another problem he solves permanently. You're lying. Am I? Ask him about Tommy Ricci. Ask him what happens to people who know too much about his business. The caller paused. Better yet, ask yourself why a man like Lorenzo De Luca would suddenly claim a nobody accountant as his wife. Love at first sight? Or strategy? The line went dead. Elena stood frozen in the kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, the voice echoing in her head. Tommy Ricci, concrete shoes, murder. She didn't know if any of it was true. Didn't know if this was Castellano trying to drive a wedge between her and Lorenzo, or if there was actual truth buried in the manipulation. But doubt had been planted, and it was growing roots fast. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lorenzo. Still at the meeting. Should be done by noon. You okay? Elena typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, fine, be careful. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, always am, for you. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt heavy with everything Elena didn't know about the man whose penthouse she was living in, whose protection she'd accepted, whose kiss still burned on her lips from last night. She pulled out her laptop and did something she probably should have done weeks ago. She searched Lorenzo De Luca. The results were a mix of legitimate business articles and whispered rumors. Owner of 3 high-end restaurants, 2 nightclubs, and a casino. Real estate developer with projects throughout the city. Estimated net worth in the hundreds of millions. Photographed at charity events. Always in expensive suits. Always alone except for the security that shadowed him everywhere. And underneath the polish, the other stories. The ones that used words like alleged and suspected ties and unconfirmed reports. Connections to families that had been running things in this city since Prohibition. Witnesses who disappeared before trials. Investigations that went nowhere because people suddenly developed amnesia or left town or ended up dead. Nothing concrete, nothing proven, but enough smoke that Elena had to admit there was probably fire. She searched Tommy Ricci next. The name brought up a news article from 4 years ago. Local man missing after dispute with business partners. Tommy Ricci, age 34, last seen leaving a downtown restaurant. Family pleading for information. Police investigating but no leads. The article was 4 years old. No follow-up stories. No resolution. Just a man who'd vanished. Elena clicked deeper, finding a forum post from someone claiming to know the real story. Tommy tried to skim from De Luca's casino. Big mistake. Everyone knows what happens when you steal from Lorenzo. You disappear. Her coffee had gone cold. Elena dumped it in the sink and made fresh, trying to organize her thoughts into something that made sense. Lorenzo had been nothing but honest with her, had told her he had enemies, had warned her his world was dangerous, had never pretended to be anything other than what he was, powerful, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it took to protect what was his. But there was a difference between knowing someone was dangerous in the abstract and confronting the possibility that the man who'd kissed her last night, who'd said he loved her, might have actually killed people. The penthouse door opened. Elena's heart jumped into her throat before Marco's voice called out, "Miss Ward, just checking in." She found him in the entryway looking exactly as unshakable as always. "I'm fine. Mr. De Luca wanted me to make sure you had everything you needed." Marco's eyes were sharp despite his casual tone. "You look upset." "Someone called me. Again, different voice this time." Marco's expression went cold. "What did they say?" Elena hesitated, then figured honesty was worth trying. "They told me Lorenzo murdered someone named Tommy Ricci. Said I should ask about concrete shoes and what happens to people who know too much." To his credit, Marco didn't try to lie. Tommy Ricci was a thief and a rat. He stole from the casino and then tried to sell information to the feds. He disappeared before anyone could do anything about it. "Did Lorenzo, I don't know." Marco cut her off. "And I don't ask. Neither should you. He lives here now, in this penthouse. With me." Elena's voice rose. "I think I have a right to know if the man I'm living with is a murderer." The man you're living with is someone who protects his own and eliminates threats. Whether that makes him a murderer depends on your definitions. Marco's tone softened slightly. Ms. Ward, I've worked for Lorenzo for 8 years. In that time, I've seen him do things that would make you sick. I've also seen him donate millions to children's hospitals anonymously, pay for surgeries for employees' kids, take care of families when their breadwinners die. He's not a good man by most standards, but he's not evil either. That's not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true. Marco checked his watch. Lorenzo will be back soon. You should ask him these questions yourself. He'll give you straight answers, even if they're ugly. After Marco left, Elena paced the penthouse like a caged animal. The view that had seemed beautiful yesterday now felt like a prison. 32 floors up. No way out except through Lorenzo's security. Dependent on his protection, his resources, his willingness to keep her safe. She'd traded one cage for another, she realized. Before it had been poverty and Vanessa's cruelty and the slow grind of never being enough. Now it was luxury and danger and questions about concrete shoes. Her phone rang, Lorenzo this time. I'm on my way back, he said without preamble. We need to talk. Yes, we do. A pause. You sound angry. I'm confused and scared, and I got another phone call telling me you're a murderer who's going to kill me when I stop being useful. Lorenzo swore in Italian. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't believe anything Castellano's people tell you until I can explain. So it's true? About Tommy Ricci? It's complicated, and I'll tell you everything when I get there. His voice roughened. But Elena, I need you to trust me for 10 more minutes. Can you do that? She wanted to say no, wanted to pack her bags and walk out and never look back. But the memory of his kiss, his confession, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd said he loved her, that kept her rooted. 10 minutes, she agreed. Lorenzo made it in 8. He came through the door looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. Suit rumpled, tie gone, dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept any more than she had. Blood on his knuckles, Elena noticed with a jolt. Not a lot, but enough to be obvious. You're hurt, she said automatically. Lorenzo glanced at his hands like he'd forgotten about them. Not my blood. Somehow that was worse. Whose blood is it? Castellano's. He moved to the sink, washing his hands with methodical precision. Or one of his men. Things got messy. Elena's throat closed. Did you kill someone? No. Lorenzo dried his hands, then turned to face her fully. But I hurt some people. Badly. Because they needed to understand that threatening you has consequences. The caller said you killed Tommy Ricci. I know, Marco told me. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Tommy Ricci tried to rob my casino. When that failed, he approached the FBI with offers to testify about my business dealings in exchange for protection. He disappeared 3 days before his first scheduled meeting. Did you make him disappear? Lorenzo held her gaze. I wanted to. I planned to. Had people ready to pick him up and make the problem go away. But someone else got to him first. Who? I don't know. Could have been one of the families worried about what he'd say. Could have been the FBI cleaning up a messy informant. Could have been Tommy himself running before things got worse. Lorenzo moved closer. But I didn't kill him, Elena. And I've never killed anyone who wasn't actively trying to kill me first. Have you killed people who were trying to kill you? Yes. No hesitation. 3 times. Once when I was 19 and someone thought I'd be an easy target. Twice more in the years since when business disagreements became violent. Self-defense, legally speaking. Murder, by some definitions. Elena sat down on the couch because her legs weren't trustworthy anymore. You're telling me this very calmly. You asked for honesty. This is what honesty looks like in my world. Lorenzo sat across from her, careful to maintain distance. I've hurt people, threatened people, destroyed lives when it suited my purposes. I'm not a good man, Elena. I've never pretended to be. But you donate to hospitals, Marco told me. I do. Millions every year. Anonymous donations because I don't want the recognition, just the knowledge that some kids get surgeries they couldn't afford otherwise. Lorenzo's smile was bitter. Doesn't make me good, just complicated. Elena's head spun. Why are you telling me all this? Because you deserve to know who you're living with, what you're risking by staying here. Lorenzo leaned forward, elbows on knees. I told you last night that I love you. That wasn't a lie. But love from someone like me comes with a price. You need to understand that before you decide if it's worth paying. What kind of price? This kind. Phone calls threatening you. Living behind security because my enemies will use you to hurt me. Knowing that the man who kisses you goodnight has also put people in the hospital. Maybe in the ground. His eyes were dark, haunted. I can give you safety and luxury and devotion that would burn the world for you. But I can't give you normal, can't give you clean, can't promise that being with me won't eventually destroy the goodness that made me notice you in the first place. Elena's throat ached. You're trying to talk me into leaving. I'm trying to be honest, like we promised. Lorenzo's hands fisted on his knees. Last night I said I love you because I thought we might not get another chance. Today I'm telling you all the reasons you should run because you deserve to make that choice with full information. What happened this morning? Where were you? Lorenzo's expression went flat. I met with Castellano. Told him that any further contact with you would result in consequences he wouldn't survive. He disagreed, violently. I made my point more clearly. With your fists. Among other things, Lorenzo showed her his knuckles, bruised and split. He has 3 broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder. His second-in-command has a broken jaw. And the man who called you this morning won't be making any more phone calls for a while. Elena felt sick. You did that because of me. I did that because they threatened what's mine and needed to learn better. Lorenzo stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Castellano pushed because he thought I was bluffing. Thought claiming you as my wife was just theater. Now he knows differently. Because you beat him. Because I showed him I'd go to war over you. Lorenzo's voice was rough. In my world, that means something. It tells every other person with thoughts about testing me that Elena Ward is untouchable, that coming after you is suicide. You started a war because someone called me on the phone. I started a war because someone threatened to hurt you, and I won't allow that. Lorenzo turned from the window, and Elena saw the rawness in his expression. I know it's violent. I know it's wrong by normal standards, but this is how my world works, Elena. Show weakness and you get destroyed. Protect what's yours with absolute force or lose it. Elena stood on shaking legs. I don't know if I can live like this. I know. Lorenzo's shoulders sagged. That's why I'm telling you. So you can leave before you're in too deep. Before loving me back becomes a prison you can't escape. Is that what you think this is? A prison? Isn't it? His laugh was hollow. You're living in my penthouse because it's not safe for you anywhere else. Can't go to work without armed guards. Can't answer your phone without wondering if it's another threat. All because I decided to claim you at a gala without thinking through what it would cost you. Elena crossed the distance between them before she could talk herself out of it. Stop. Elena, stop trying to push me away by listing all the reasons I should go. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. You think I don't know you're dangerous? You think I haven't figured out that being with you means living in a world I don't understand? I'm not stupid, Lorenzo. I never said you were. Then stop treating me like I can't handle the truth. Elena's voice shook. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, this is insane. But you know what scares me more? Walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have happened if I'd been brave enough to stay. Lorenzo's hands came up to cover hers. You'd be safer without me. Maybe, but I'd also be alone. Fighting battles I can't win. Letting people like Vanessa tear me down because I don't have the power to stop them. Elena's eyes burned. You gave me that power, made me untouchable, treated me like I mattered when no one else did. So forgive me if I'm not ready to walk away just because things got complicated. This is more than complicated. I know. She cut him off. You beat someone up this morning, threatened a drug dealer, admitted you've killed people in self-defense. I heard all of it, and I'm still standing here. Lorenzo's expression cracked. Why? Because last night you told me you loved me, and I've never felt safer in my life. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. Because I think I might love you too, even though it's insane and I barely know you and everything about this is wrong. Elena, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. I spent my whole life being invisible, being underestimated, being treated like I didn't matter. You saw me. Really saw me. Not because I was useful or pretty or connected, but because I gave my lunch to a homeless man and you thought that meant something. It did mean something. Then let it keep meaning something. Elena's thumbs brushed his cheekbones. Don't push me away because you're scared I can't handle your world. Let me decide what I can handle. Lorenzo pulled her closer, forehead resting against hers. I'm terrified of failing you. Join the club. I'm terrified of everything right now. Elena laughed wetly. But I'm more terrified of living without you than I am of living with danger. That's not logical. Nothing about this is logical. She kissed him, tasting coffee and exhaustion and fear. But it's true. When they pulled apart, Lorenzo's eyes were suspiciously bright. You're sure? No, but I'm staying anyway. He kissed her again, deeper this time, hands tangling in her hair like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. Elena melted into him, into the heat and the safety and the absolute certainty that this man would burn the world before he let anything happen to her. It should have scared her more than it did. They ended up on the couch, Elena curled against Lorenzo's chest, his heartbeat steady under her ear. His hands traced patterns on her back, soothing and possessive at once. I need to tell you something else, Lorenzo said quietly. Elena tensed. More honesty? Always. He paused. This morning, when I confronted Castellano, I made him an offer. Stop threatening you, stop interfering with my business, and I'd let him keep his territory. He refused. What does that mean? It means this doesn't end until one of us is gone. Lorenzo's arms tightened around her. He's already called in reinforcements, bringing in people from out of town, planning something big. How big? Big enough that I need to handle it personally, tonight. Elena sat up. What are you going to do? End this. Lorenzo's expression was grim. I'm meeting him at the warehouse district, neutral territory. We talk, we settle this, and hopefully no one dies. Hopefully? I'm bringing enough firepower that dying would be a choice, not an accident. Lorenzo cupped her face. But there's a chance things go wrong, a chance Castellano doesn't come to talk, but to finish this violently. I need you to understand that possibility. Elena's stomach dropped. You're telling me you might not come back. I'm telling you there's risk, more than usual. Lorenzo's thumbs brushed her cheekbones, which is why I need you to promise me something. What? If I don't come back by midnight, you take the emergency cash in the bedroom safe, you use the passport Marco will give you, and you disappear. New city, new name, new life where Castellano's people can't find you. Lorenzo, promise me, Elena, if something happens to me, you get out. You don't try to fight them. You don't try to get revenge. You just vanish and stay safe. Tears blurred her vision. I'm not promising that. You have to. I don't have to do anything. Elena's voice broke. You don't get to tell me you love me and then make me promise to abandon you if things go wrong. I'm trying to protect you. By asking me to leave you behind? To just walk away if you die? She shoved at his chest. That's not protection, Lorenzo. That's giving up. It's being realistic. Lorenzo caught her hands. If I die tonight, you become a liability. A witness. Someone who knows too much. Castellano will kill you, or worse. The only way you survive is if you're gone before anyone can find you. Then don't die! Elena's tears spilled over. Don't go to this meeting. Send someone else. Stay here where it's safe. I can't. If I don't show, I look weak. Every enemy I have will see it as an opening. Lorenzo pulled her close again. This is what I do, Elena. I handle threats. I protect what's mine. And right now, the best way to protect you is to eliminate Castellano permanently. What if he eliminates you first? He won't, said with absolute certainty. I've been doing this since I was 16 years old. I know how to survive. Tommy Ricci probably thought the same thing. Lorenzo flinched. That was different. Was it? Elena pulled back to look at him. Or are you just as vulnerable as everyone else and too proud to admit it? I'm being careful. You're walking into a meeting with a man who wants you dead. That's not careful. That's suicide. Her voice rose. And you're asking me to just accept it. To sit here and wait and promise that if you don't come back, I'll run away like none of this mattered. It matters. Lorenzo's voice cracked. You matter more than anything. which is exactly why I need to know you'll be safe if this goes wrong. They stared at each other, the weight of the conversation crushing the air between them. I can't promise that, Elena finally said. I can't promise to leave you behind. Even if staying gets you killed? Even then, she wiped her eyes. You told me I get to choose what I can handle. This is me choosing. I don't run. Lorenzo's expression shifted through a dozen emotions before settling on something that looked like resignation mixed with pride. You're stubborn. I learned from the best. He kissed her forehead, gentle and lingering. If I don't come back, you're coming back. Elena, you're coming back, she repeated firmly, because I didn't just agree to live in your world and deal with all of this insanity so you could get yourself killed at a warehouse meeting. You're coming back. End of discussion. Lorenzo's laugh was strained. Yes, ma'am. The rest of the day passed in surreal slow motion. Lorenzo made phone calls in his office, voice low and intense, coordinating things Elena didn't want to know about. Marco came and went, bringing weapons that made Elena's stomach turn. Men in suits arrived, had brief conversations, and left looking grim. Elena tried to work on her laptop. Failed. Tried to read. Failed at that too. Ended up staring out the window at the city, wondering if this was what it felt like to wait for a battle you couldn't fight. Around 6, Lorenzo emerged from his office looking like he'd aged another decade. He'd changed into darker clothes. Black pants, black shirt, jacket that probably concealed more weapons than Elena wanted to think about. I need to leave soon, he said. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Lorenzo crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. I love you. In case I didn't say it enough today. You did. Elena's face pressed against his chest. But you can say it again. I love you. He tilted her chin up. And I'm coming back. I promise. You better. She kissed him, trying to pour everything she felt into it, fear and hope and love and absolute terror that this might be the last time. When they broke apart, Lorenzo's eyes were suspiciously wet. Wait for me. Always. He left with Marco and 3 other men, all of them moving with the coordinated precision of soldiers. The penthouse door closed behind them with a finality that made Elena's chest ache. She was alone. The clock on the wall read 6:47. Lorenzo said he'd be back by midnight. That was 5 hours and 13 minutes of waiting, of not knowing, of imagining every terrible thing that could happen and trying not to spiral into panic. Elena made herself tea. Didn't drink it. Made dinner. Couldn't eat. Paced the penthouse until her feet hurt, and her mind was screaming. At 9:30, her phone rang. Unknown number. Her hand shook as she answered. Hello? He's not coming back. The smooth voice from this morning, Castellano's man. Lorenzo walked into a trap thinking he was untouchable. He was wrong. Elena's world tilted. You're lying. Am I? Wait and see. When midnight comes and he's still not home, you'll know the truth. Your husband is dead, Miss Ward. And soon you will be too. The line went dead. Elena stood frozen, the phone slipping from her hand, the words echoing in her skull. Dead. Trap. Midnight. No. Lorenzo was too smart for traps, too careful, too experienced. But Tommy Ricci had disappeared despite being careful. People in Lorenzo's world died all the time, despite being smart. The clock read 9:34. 2.5 hours until midnight. 2.5 hours to find out if the man she loved was coming home, or if she was about to be alone in a world that wanted her dead. Elena sank onto the couch, wrapped her arms around herself, and waited. 10 o'clock came and went. Then 10:30. Elena wore a path in the carpet between the window and the couch, phone clutched in her hand, willing it to ring with Lorenzo's voice telling her he was fine. Everything was handled. He was coming home. It stayed silent. At 11, she called him. Straight to voicemail. She tried Marco. Same thing. The other numbers Lorenzo had given her for emergencies. All voicemail. All silence. All confirmation that something had gone terribly wrong. Elena's hand shook as she pulled up the contacts list again. There had to be someone. Someone who knew what was happening. Someone who could tell her if Lorenzo was alive or dead or somewhere in between. Her finger hovered over the emergency number Lorenzo had made her memorize. The one he'd said was only for absolute disasters. The one that would bring help, but also questions she might not want to answer. She dialed. It rang once before a woman's voice answered, crisp and professional. Identification. Elena Ward, Lorenzo's... She stumbled over the word. His wife. A pause. Confirmed. What's your emergency, Mrs. DeLuca? Mrs. DeLuca. The name hit like a physical blow. Lorenzo went to meet Castellano at 11. He said he'd be back by midnight. I got a call saying he walked into a trap. I can't reach him or Marco or anyone, and I don't know what to do. Hold, please. Silence. Elena counted her heartbeats. Got to 47 before the woman came back. Mrs. DeLuca, I'm showing Lorenzo's last known location at the warehouse district, grid 7. Communication went dark at approximately 10:42. We have units en route, but ETA is 15 minutes. 15 minutes? Elena's voice cracked. What if he doesn't have 15 minutes? I understand your concern, but protocol requires... I don't care about protocol. Elena was already moving, grabbing her coat, her keys, her purse. Tell me how to get to grid 7. Mrs. DeLuca, I strongly advise against... I'm not asking for advice. I'm asking for directions. Elena's hand was on the door handle. Either tell me or I'll find it myself. Another pause. Then the woman rattled off an address and crossed streets, her disapproval clear in every syllable. However, I must emphasize that entering an active situation without proper security is extremely dangerous. Mr. DeLuca would not want you to... Elena hung up. The parking garage was deserted at this hour. Elena's car, a 10-year-old sedan that looked pathetic next to the luxury vehicles surrounding it, sat where she'd left it weeks ago, gathering dust. She hadn't driven since moving into the penthouse, hadn't needed to with Marco handling transportation. Now she was grateful for the independence. The engine turned over on the third try. Elena pulled out of the garage with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, the woman's words echoing in her head. Communication went dark. Units en route. Extremely dangerous. She should wait. Should let the professionals handle this. Should trust that Lorenzo knew what he was doing and could take care of himself. But the voice on the phone had been so certain. Your husband is dead. And Lorenzo had been so careful to prepare her for the worst, to make sure she understood that tonight might be the night everything fell apart. Elena couldn't sit in that penthouse waiting to find out if the man she loved was coming home or if she was about to become a widow to a marriage that had never been legal in the first place. The warehouse district was exactly as miserable as it sounded. Abandoned buildings with broken windows, streets full of potholes, the kind of area where people came to do things they didn't want witnessed. Elena's headlights cut through darkness that felt thicker than it should, revealing graffiti and garbage and absolutely no signs of life. Grid 7 was a massive structure that might have been a factory once. Now it was just rust and shadows and the perfect place for a meeting no one wanted traced. Elena parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, every instinct screaming that this was a terrible idea. But terrible ideas were apparently her specialty now, falling for a man she barely knew, moving into his penthouse, deciding that loving someone dangerous was worth the risk. She heard voices before she saw anything, male, raised in argument, echoing off metal and concrete. Elena crept closer, using shadows and debris for cover, until she could see through a gap in the warehouse wall. Lorenzo was alive. The relief hit so hard, Elena had to grab the wall for support. He was alive and standing, and apparently in the middle of a negotiation that looked about 3 seconds from turning into a bloodbath. Castellanos stood across from him, older than Elena had pictured, gray-haired and distinguished-looking despite the swelling on his face from this morning's beating. Between them, maybe 20 feet of empty space and enough tension to choke on. Behind each man, armed supporters. Lorenzo had Marco and 5 others, all holding weapons with the casual competence of people who knew how to use them. Castellano had twice as many, spread out in a semicircle that suggested this had always been about overwhelming force rather than fair negotiation. You're outnumbered, DeLuca. Castellano's voice was smooth despite the split lip. Even you can't shoot your way out of this. Maybe not. Lorenzo's tone was calm, almost bored. But I can take you with me. Question is whether that trade is worth it to your men. They're loyal. They're mercenaries. The moment you're dead, they'll be looking for new employment. Lorenzo's eyes scanned the opposition with calculated precision. And I'm very good at remembering faces. Anyone here tonight who survives will spend the rest of their life looking over their shoulder, waiting for me to return the favor." One of Castellano's men shifted uncomfortably. Lorenzo smiled like he'd won a point. "This is about territory," Castellano said. "About respect. You can't just claim the East District and expect me to roll over." "I don't want your territory. Never did. I want you to stop threatening my wife." Lorenzo's voice dropped to something colder than Elena had ever heard from him. "You've made this personal, used her to get to me. That ends tonight, one way or another. She's leverage, same as any other weakness." "She's not a weakness." Lorenzo took a step forward, and half the guns in the room tracked the movement. "She's the line you don't cross. But you crossed it anyway, called her, threatened her, made her afraid in her own home. So now we're here, and one of us isn't leaving." Castellano laughed. "You'd die for some girl you've known a month?" Without hesitation, no doubt in Lorenzo's voice. "The question is whether you're willing to die for pride." The standoff stretched. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack through. This was insane. 20 armed men pointing weapons at each other, waiting for someone to flinch, to break, to start the violence that would end with bodies on the concrete. She should leave. Should get back to her car and wait for the professionals like the woman on the phone had said. Should trust Lorenzo to handle this the way he'd been handling things for years before Elena existed in his world. Instead, she stepped out of the shadows. Every gun swung toward her. Elena froze, hands raised, very aware that she'd just made herself a target for people who killed for a living. "Elena, what the hell are you doing here?" Lorenzo's voice was strangled, terrified in a way she'd never heard. "Stopping you from getting killed." Elena forced herself to walk forward, even though her legs wanted to collapse. "Both of you. Get back in the shadows," Lorenzo ordered. "Right now." "No." Elena stopped in the empty space between the two groups, the most exposed position in the room. "Because if shooting starts, I'm the first one hit, which means whoever fires first kills Lorenzo's wife. And I'm guessing that's not a legacy anyone here wants." "You're insane," Castellano said, but his gun lowered slightly. "Probably." Elena's voice shook but held. "But I'm also the person you've been using to threaten Lorenzo. The leverage, the weakness. So here I am. No protection, no security, just me. You want to prove a point? Make your move." "Elena?" Lorenzo started forward and 3 guns immediately centered on his chest. He froze, hands raised, eyes locked on Elena with an expression that was pure terror wrapped in fury. "I'm trying to help," Elena said to him, then turned to Castellano. "You said this was about respect, about Lorenzo not acknowledging your power. Fine. You want respect? You've got it. Everyone in this city knows you're dangerous enough to scare me, to make Lorenzo show up here outnumbered. You've proven your point." "Have I?" Castellano studied her with cold calculation. "Or have I just proven that DeLuca's weakness is a woman stupid enough to walk into a death trap? Maybe both." Elena's hands were still raised, but her voice steadied. "But here's what else you've proven. That killing me would start a war you can't win. Lorenzo might die tonight, but Marco survives. Those 5 men behind him survive. And they'll spend the rest of their lives hunting everyone in this room until nobody's left. We're already in that war. Are you?" Elena looked at the men behind Castellano. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like 20 guys who are about to die for a pride issue between 2 people. Lorenzo won't stop coming after you. You won't stop threatening him. And everyone else just becomes collateral damage in a fight that benefits nobody." One of Castellano's men lowered his weapon slightly. Then another. Castellano's jaw tightened. "You think you can negotiate peace by standing in the crossfire?" Castellano's voice dripped contempt. "That's not how this world works, little girl." "I know how this world works. I've spent weeks learning." Elena took a breath. "It works on power and fear and respect. Lorenzo has all 3. So do you. But what you don't have is a good reason to die tonight. Neither does he. So maybe instead of proving who's tougher, you both walk away and find a solution that doesn't end with funerals." "There is no solution," Lorenzo said quietly. "He threatened you. That's unforgivable. So make him pay another way." Elena turned to face Lorenzo fully, ignoring the guns still pointed at her back. "You told me you've spent 10 years building an empire, gaining power, making money. Are you really going to throw all of that away because someone scared me on the phone? He did more than scare you. And you beat him for it, broke his ribs, sent a message. Elena's voice softened. But if you die here tonight, what happens to me? You made me a target by claiming me as yours. If you're gone, I'm just a loose end for every one of your enemies to tie up. Is that what you want? Lorenzo's expression cracked. No. Then find another way. Elena held his gaze. Not because Castellano deserves mercy, not because this is fair, but because I need you alive more than I need you to win this fight. The silence stretched so long Elena thought she'd failed. Then Lorenzo lowered his gun. Stand down, he ordered his men. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but obeyed. The others followed suit, weapons lowering, creating a ripple effect that should have felt like victory, but mostly felt like holding her breath underwater. Castellano watched with narrowed eyes. What's the play here, DeLuca? The play is I don't die tonight, and neither do you. Lorenzo's voice was flat. But this ends. No more calls to Elena. No more threats. No more testing boundaries. You want the East District? Take it. I'll pull my operations out within the month. Just like that? Just like that. Lorenzo's jaw was tight. But if I hear you've gone near my wife again, if she gets so much as a wrong number from one of your people, I will burn your world to the ground, slowly, painfully, in ways that make tonight look like a friendly conversation. Castellano studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. You really would die for her? Without hesitation. Interesting. Castellano holstered his weapon. I can respect that. Man who won't protect his own isn't worth the fight anyway. He gestured to his men. We're done here. The tension didn't dissolve so much as shift. Castellano's people backed toward the exits, weapons still ready but no longer actively threatening. Lorenzo's men did the same, creating a slow migration towards separate doors that felt like the longest few minutes of Elena's life. When the warehouse was finally empty, except for Lorenzo, Marco, and Elena, the adrenaline crashed and Elena's legs gave out. Lorenzo caught her before she hit concrete, arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. You idiot! You beautiful, terrifying idiot! I couldn't just wait, Elena managed through chattering teeth. The phone call said you were dead, and I couldn't. You walked into an active standoff with 20 armed men because someone told you I was dead? Lorenzo pulled back far enough to look at her face. Do you have any idea how close you came to getting shot? About as close as you did? Lorenzo's laugh was strained. Closer. I had backup. You had nothing. I had you. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt. I knew you wouldn't let them hurt me. I might not have had a choice. Lorenzo's voice cracked. If Castellano had decided to shoot you to prove a point, but he didn't, because I gave him an out. A way to walk away without losing face. Elena's adrenaline was fading into exhaustion. Did it work? Is this over? Lorenzo looked to Marco, who'd been standing silent guard during the exchange. Marco nodded slowly. I think so. Castellano's smart enough to know when a war costs more than it's worth. And you gave him territory in exchange for peace. He'll take that deal. What if he doesn't? Elena asked. Then we handle it. Lorenzo's arms tightened. But not tonight. Tonight I'm taking you home before you do anything else terrifyingly brave. The drive back was silent. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Lorenzo's car. Marco drove her sedan, apparently unwilling to leave it in the warehouse district, watching the city pass and trying to process what had just happened. She'd walked into a standoff with armed men, had made herself a target to create a stalemate, had negotiated peace through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that violence was the only option. It was the stupidest thing she'd ever done. Also possibly the bravest. She wasn't sure which scared her more. Back at the penthouse, Lorenzo steered her to the couch and disappeared into the kitchen. He returned with whiskey for himself and tea for her, sitting close enough that their knees touched. Don't ever do that again, he said quietly. Walk into danger? Risk yourself for me. Lorenzo's hand found hers. I can't lose you, Elena. Not to Castellano. Not to anyone. If something had happened tonight, it didn't. But it could have. Lorenzo's grip tightened. You stood in the line of fire because you were scared I was dead. That's not okay. You were going to die for me without hesitation, your words. Elena turned to face him fully. So don't get mad at me for doing the same thing. That's different. How? Because you're used to violence and I'm not? Because your life is worth less than mine? Elena's voice rose. You told me we were equals in this, partners. So either we both get to make stupid sacrificial choices or neither of us does. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. You're going to make me insane. Probably. Elena managed a smile. But I'm also going to keep you alive, so it balances out. Does it? Lorenzo pulled her closer until she was curled against his chest, his heartbeat steady under her ear. I've never had someone willing to die for me before. People follow me out of fear or profit. Nobody's ever just walked into danger because they couldn't stand the thought of losing me. Well, now you do. Elena's eyes were heavy with exhaustion and adrenaline crash. So get used to it. They sat in silence, the city glittering beyond the windows, both of them processing how close they'd come to losing everything. I meant what I said, Lorenzo murmured, about giving Castellano the East District. I'm done fighting wars over territory. Not worth it anymore. What changed? You. Lorenzo's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. I've spent 10 years building power, accumulating wealth, crushing anyone who got in my way. And tonight I realize none of it matters as much as keeping you safe. So if peace costs me territory, fine. I'll make money other ways. Elena lifted her head to look at him. You're going legitimate? I'm going less illegitimate. Lorenzo's smile was wry. Still own the casino and the clubs. But no more wars, no more territory disputes, just business. Boring, legal business. That's a big change. You're worth a big change. Lorenzo cupped her face. And honestly, I'm tired. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering which friend is actually an enemy. Tired of living like every day might be my last. What about the people who work for you, Marco and the others? Marco's been trying to get me to go straight for years. Says I'm too old for street fights. Lorenzo's thumb brushed her cheekbone. He'll be thrilled. The others will adjust or find new employment. Most of them are tired too. Elena thought about the men who'd stood behind Lorenzo tonight, weapons ready but faces weary. About Marco's patient protection and quiet competence. About a world where violence was just business and loyalty was bought with fear. I don't want you to change for me, she said carefully. I want you to change because it's what you want. I want you, the rest is negotiable. Lorenzo kissed her forehead. But you're right that I've been thinking about this for a while. You just gave me a reason to actually do it instead of just planning. They fell quiet again. Elena's exhaustion was winning the war against adrenaline. Her eyes kept drifting closed despite her best efforts. Come on, Lorenzo said gently. You need sleep. It's been a very long night. He guided her to her bedroom, still technically the guest room, even though they both knew she'd never actually been a guest. Elena changed into pajamas with fingers that fumbled on buttons, brushed her teeth on autopilot, and crawled into bed with the intention of passing out immediately. Lorenzo lingered in the doorway. Do you want me to stay? Elena's heart jumped. Yes? He crossed the room and climbed in beside her, still fully clothed, apparently just planning to be close rather than anything more. Elena curled into his side, head on his shoulder, and felt something in her chest finally unclench. We almost died tonight, she murmured. We did. And tomorrow we have to figure out what happens next. We do. Lorenzo's arm wrapped around her. But tonight we're alive and together and safe. That's enough. Elena wanted to argue that it wasn't enough, that they needed plans and contingencies and answers to questions she didn't even know how to ask. But exhaustion pulled her under before she could form the words. She dreamed of gunfire and shadows and Lorenzo's voice calling her name. Morning came with sunlight and the smell of coffee. Elena woke alone but could hear movement in the kitchen, the clink of dishes, low voices, normality that felt surreal after last night's chaos. She found Lorenzo at the kitchen island with Marco, both of them looking at a laptop screen and discussing something in Italian. They switched to English when Elena appeared. Morning, Lorenzo said, standing to pour her coffee. How'd you sleep? Like the dead. Elena winced at her word choice. Poor phrasing. Accurate, though. Lorenzo handed her a mug. We've been discussing logistics. Castellano's already pulling back from contested territories. Looks like he's honoring the deal. That's good, right? That's very good. Marco's expression was almost smiling. Means no more late-night standoffs, no more threats, just boring business. What about Elena's security? Lorenzo asked. Do we maintain current protocols or scale back? Maintain for now. Give it a month to make sure Castellano's people got the message. Marco glanced at Elena. After that, probably safe to ease up. Let you have something resembling a normal life again. Normal. The word felt foreign. Elena had been living in Lorenzo's world for weeks now, surrounded by guards and threats and constant danger. The idea of just walking around without Marco shadowing her every move seemed impossible. What about work? She asked. I've been on leave since moving in here. At some point I need to figure out if I still have a job. Lorenzo and Marco exchanged glances. About that, Lorenzo started. Elena's stomach dropped. What did you do? Nothing terrible? Probably. Lorenzo had the grace to look slightly guilty. I bought your company. Well, a controlling share. Enough that I can make sure Vanessa Price no longer has the power to make your life miserable. Elena stared at him. You bought my company. Technically, I bought 49%. The other partners still maintain control. Lorenzo sipped his coffee like this was completely normal. But I have enough influence now to suggest that Vanessa might be happier in a different department, or different company, preferably different state. You can't just... Elena stopped. Actually, you probably can. You're you. I can. And I did. Lorenzo set down his mug. I know you wanted to fight your own battles, but this is me using my power to make sure you never have to deal with people like her again. If that's overstepping, tell me and I'll back off. Elena thought about Vanessa's smirk, the constant undermining, the public humiliation at the gala that had started this entire situation. Then she thought about Lorenzo walking into a standoff because someone had threatened her, about his willingness to die rather than let her be hurt. It's definitely overstepping, she said slowly, but I'm not going to tell you to stop. Lorenzo's relief was visible. Good, because I already initiated the purchase and backing out now would be awkward. When did you even have time to do this? Made some calls this morning while you were sleeping. Lorenzo pulled her onto the stool next to him. Figured if we're building a life together, it should include you not dreading going to work every day. Building a life together, Elena repeated. Is that what we're doing? I hope so. Lorenzo's hand found hers. Unless last night scared you off. Last night terrified me. But I'm still here. Elena laced their fingers together. So, yes, I guess we're building a life together. Whatever that looks like. Marco cleared his throat. I'll give you two some privacy. Lorenzo, the contractor, called about the warehouse renovations. I'll handle it unless you want to review the plans. You handle it, I trust your judgment. Lorenzo waited until Marco left before turning back to Elena. There's something else we need to talk about. Why do I feel like I'm not going to like this? Because you know me too well already. Lorenzo took a breath. The marriage. Right now it's just for show. A claim I made at a gala that became real enough to protect you. But I want to make it legal. Elena's heart stopped. What? I want to marry you. Actually marry you. Not just pretend. Lorenzo's eyes were serious. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but last night when I thought I might not come back, all I could think was that you deserved more than being a fake wife to a dead man. You deserved to be someone's actual wife, someone's partner, someone's choice. Lorenzo, I want to be that person. I want to marry you legally, publicly, permanently. I want you to be Elena DeLuca not because I claimed you at a party, but because you chose me. His grip tightened, and I know I'm asking for everything too fast, but I've wasted enough years on things that don't matter. I don't want to waste any more time pretending I don't know what I want. Elena's throat closed. You want to marry me? I want to marry you. No hesitation. Real wedding, real vows, real forever. We barely know each other. I know you give your lunch to homeless men. I know you walked into a standoff to save my life. I know you asked for honesty when most people ask for money. I know you make me want to be better than I am. Lorenzo's voice roughened, What else do I need to know? Whether I snore, how I take my eggs, what I'm like when I'm sick. Elena's smile was watery. The boring stuff, the real stuff. Then we'll learn it together. Lorenzo stood, pulling her up with him. As husband and wife, if you'll have me. Elena's mind spun. This was insane. Marrying a man she'd known for weeks, building a life with someone whose world included violence and danger and power she barely understood, choosing love over logic, passion over safety, the terrifying unknown over comfortable loneliness. It was the stupidest thing she could possibly do. Yes, she heard herself say. Lorenzo's expression transformed. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Really marry you, even though it's crazy and we're probably going to mess this up in 1,000 different ways. Elena pulled him closer. But I'd rather mess it up with you than get it right with anyone else. Lorenzo kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Elena kissed back with everything she had, fear and hope and love, and the absolute certainty that this man would spend the rest of his life keeping her safe, even if it killed him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I love you too. Elena laughed, the sound half sob. Even though you're definitely going to drive me insane. Fair. You're going to give me a heart attack with your stubbornly brave choices. Lorenzo's smile was brilliant, but we'll survive it together. The wedding happened 3 months later. Not the rushed courthouse affair Elena had half expected, but an actual ceremony with guests and flowers and all the traditional elements Lorenzo insisted she deserved. The same ballroom where they'd met, transformed from a place of humiliation into something beautiful. Elena wore white, a dress that actually fit her body and her budget, chosen with her sister's help and Lorenzo's credit card despite her protests. Her hair was professionally done for the first time in her life. Her makeup made her look like a stranger in the mirror, but a stranger she could get used to. The guest list was small: Elena's sister and brother-in-law, a few co-workers from her firm who'd been kind during Vanessa's reign of terror. Vanessa herself was conspicuously absent, having transferred to the Denver office the month before with a severance package generous enough to make the relocation attractive. Lorenzo's side was different. Marco stood as best man, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, but fiercely proud. Business associates filled several rows, all of them treating Elena with the kind of respect that suggested they'd gotten very clear instructions about proper behavior. A few people Elena recognized from news articles as powerful figures in the city's legitimate business world. No obvious criminals, no one who looked like they carried guns to weddings. Lorenzo had kept his promise about going straight, and it showed in the guest list. The ceremony was simple. No religious elements. Lorenzo hadn't asked why, and Elena hadn't explained her childhood of bouncing between foster homes without consistent anything, including faith. Just vows they'd written themselves, promises to be honest and brave and willing to mess things up together. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Lorenzo kissed Elena like he was sealing a blood oath. The room erupted in applause that felt genuinely happy instead of obligatory. Mrs. DeLuca, Lorenzo murmured against her lips. Mr. DeLuca, Elena answered, testing the words. They fit better than her dress. The reception was everything Elena had never known she wanted. Good food, actual dancing, champagne that didn't end up spilled on anyone. Lorenzo's hand never left her waist, keeping her close like he was afraid she might vanish if he looked away. Late in the evening, when most guests had said their goodbyes and only the stragglers remained, Elena found herself on the balcony overlooking the city. The same city that had felt so hostile months ago now glittered with possibility. Lorenzo joined her, jacket gone, tie loosened, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Tired? Exhausted. Happy. Terrified. Elena leaned into his side. All of it at once. Good terrified or bad terrified? Good, I think. The kind where you're scared because something matters too much to lose. Elena looked up at him. We really did this. Got married. Made it legal. We really did. Lorenzo's arm wrapped around her waist. Any regrets? Ask me in 50 years. Deal. Lorenzo kissed her temple. For what it's worth, I think we're going to be okay. Better than okay. Why? Because we started with honesty, built on truth instead of pretty lies. And because you're stubborn enough to call me on my mistakes, and I'm obsessed enough to keep trying to deserve you. Lorenzo smiled. That's got to count for something. Elena thought about the journey from that gala to this moment, from humiliation to protection to love, from pretending to be married to actually meaning the vows, from two broken people finding something whole in each other despite every logical reason to walk away. It counts for everything, she said quietly. They stood together watching the city, and for the first time and longer than Elena could remember, the future felt like something to look forward to instead of just survive. 6 months after the wedding, Elena stood in the downtown office building that housed the DeLuca Foundation headquarters and tried not to feel overwhelmed by what they'd built. The foundation had been Lorenzo's idea, a way to channel his wealth into something that actually helped people instead of just accumulating in investment accounts. Elena had expected him to hire professional philanthropists to run it, people with degrees in nonprofit management and experience with grant making. Instead, he'd asked her to do it. "You're the one who gave your lunch to a homeless man," he'd said when she protested. "You understand what it's like to struggle, to need help and not get it. That's worth more than any degree." So Elena had quit her accounting job, much to her boss's disappointment and Vanessa's long-distance fury, and thrown herself into learning how to run a foundation. Turned out knowing how to manage budgets and analyze financial statements translated pretty well to evaluating grant applications and tracking program outcomes. The foundation focused on 3 areas: children's hospitals, housing assistance, and job training programs. All things that would have helped Elena during the hardest years of her life. All things that mattered to people who'd been forgotten by the system. They'd just announced their first round of grants, $2 million split between 15 organizations doing actual good work instead of just hosting fancy galas. Elena had personally visited every single recipient, had shaken hands with the people running shelters and clinics and training centers, had seen firsthand where the money was going. It felt right in a way her accounting job never had. "You're doing it again," Lorenzo said from the doorway. Elena turned from the window where she'd been watching the city. "Doing what?" "Looking proud of yourself. It's a good look on you." Lorenzo crossed the office and pulled her into his arms. "How was the site visit?" "Good. The job training center is already at full capacity. They're talking about expanding." Elena rested her head on his chest. "We're actually making a difference. It's weird. Weird good or weird bad?" "Weird good. I spent so many years just trying to survive. Now I get to help other people do more than that." Elena pulled back to look at him. "Thank you for this, for believing I could do it. I didn't give you anything you didn't earn." Lorenzo's smile was soft. "You're brilliant and compassionate and exactly what this foundation needs. I just provided the initial funding, and the office space, and the staff, and the connections to get meetings with people who actually matter." Elena poked his chest. "Don't downplay your part in this." "Fine. We're a good team." Lorenzo kissed her forehead. "Speaking of which, Marco wants to talk to us about security for the gala next month. Apparently some of the guests are considered high risk." Elena groaned. "I thought we were done with that world. Mostly done. But some of my old contacts still exist. They just don't shoot at each other anymore." Lorenzo's expression went serious. "Is it too much? The foundation events, the publicity, all the attention?" "No," Elena said honestly. "It's different attention than before. People aren't looking at me like I don't belong anymore. They're looking at me like I matter. You always mattered. To you, maybe? To the world?" Elena shrugged. "I was invisible until you made me visible. That's not a bad thing, just different." They talked logistics for the gala, security protocols, guest list approval, seating arrangements that wouldn't create diplomatic incidents, normal problems for their very not normal life. That night, back in the penthouse that had stopped feeling like a museum and started feeling like home, Elena found Lorenzo on the balcony staring at the city. "You okay?" she asked, joining him. "Just thinking." Lorenzo's arm automatically wrapped around her waist. "About how much has changed. A year ago I was alone in this penthouse, building an empire I didn't care about, fighting wars that didn't matter. Now I have you, have a foundation doing actual good, have a life that means something beyond just accumulating power. Sounds like a good year. Best of my life." Lorenzo turned to face her fully. And I have something to tell you. Elena's stomach jumped. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. Lorenzo took a breath. Castellano reached out. Wants to meet. Says he has a business proposition that could benefit both of us. Should I be worried? Probably not. He's been clean since our warehouse meeting. No threats, no territory disputes, nothing but legitimate business. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. But I wanted you to know before I met with him. No secrets. That was our deal. Elena studied his face. Do you want to meet with him? Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell. The other part is curious what he wants. Lorenzo's smile was rueful. The businessman in me says at least hear him out. The husband in me says anything involving Castellano is too risky. Then bring Marco, meet in public. And if it feels wrong, walk away. Elena touched his cheek. But don't avoid it just because I exist. I married all of you, including the part that's still connected to that world. You're too understanding. I'm pragmatic. You can't erase your past. Best we can do is make sure it doesn't define your future. Elena kissed him. Just come home safe. Always do. For you. The meeting with Castellano happened 2 weeks later at a downtown restaurant. Marco positioned at a nearby table and Elena on speed dial just in case. Lorenzo came home that evening looking thoughtful instead of tense. Well? Elena asked. He wants to invest in the foundation. Anonymous donation, no strings attached. $5 million. Lorenzo loosened his tie. Says he's been thinking about legacy, about what he leaves behind when he dies. Wants it to be more than just territory wars and grudges. Elena blinked. Victor Castellano wants to donate to charity. Apparently threatening my wife inspired some soul-searching. Lorenzo's smile was wry. He sees what we're building and wants to be part of something that matters. His words. Do you believe him? I think he's genuinely tired of the life we used to lead. Same as me. And I think seeing us make the transition successfully gave him ideas about his own exit strategy. Lorenzo pulled Elena onto the couch. I told him we'd consider it. That it's your foundation, so your call whether we take his money. Elena thought about it. About the good that $5 million could do. About job training programs and housing assistance and children's hospital wings. About the fact that money was just money. It didn't care where it came from, only where it went. We take it, she decided. But we're transparent about the source. I won't hide that it's from Castellano. People deserve to know. Even if it causes problems, even then. We built this on honesty. We keep building on honesty. Elena met his eyes. That's non-negotiable. Lorenzo kissed her with a reverence that made her heart ache. Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in the last few hours. Unacceptable. I love you. You're brilliant and principled and make me want to be the best version of myself. Lorenzo's forehead touched hers. And I'm grateful every single day that you walked into that gala and let me claim you as mine. I didn't let you do anything. You just decided. Elena smiled. But I'm grateful you did, even if it was completely insane. Best insane decision I ever made. They sat together on the couch, the city glittering beyond the windows, building a life that mattered instead of just enduring one that didn't. 1 year after their legal wedding, Elena discovered she was pregnant. The test sat on the bathroom counter while she paced the bedroom, trying to process the 2 pink lines that had appeared with terrifying speed. Pregnant. She was pregnant. They were going to have a baby. Terror and joy warred in her chest with equal intensity. Lorenzo found her 20 minutes later, still pacing, still processing. What's wrong? Elena pointed wordlessly at the bathroom. Lorenzo looked at the test, looked at Elena, looked at the test again, then he swept her into his arms with a whoop of joy that made her laugh despite her fear. We're having a baby, he said into her hair. We're actually having a baby. Are you happy? Elena's voice was small. Happy? Lorenzo pulled back to look at her face. I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But yes, I'm happy. Are you? I don't know how to be a mother. I didn't have the best examples growing up. Elena's eyes burned. What if I mess this up? Then we mess it up together, same as everything else. Lorenzo's hands framed her face. But you're going to be an amazing mother. You're kind and patient, and you know what it's like to need someone to believe in you. That's everything a kid needs. You think so? I know so. Lorenzo kissed her gently. And I'm going to be the father who's present, who shows up, who protects this kid from everything I can and helps them face what I can't. We're going to do this together. Elena let herself believe him. Let herself imagine a future with a child who had Lorenzo's eyes and her determination. A child who grew up safe and loved and never doubted that they mattered. Okay, she breathed. Okay, we're having a baby. We're having a baby, Lorenzo echoed, and his smile was brilliant enough to light the whole city. The pregnancy was complicated by Elena's anxiety and Lorenzo's overprotective tendencies, but they navigated it together. Doctor's appointments with Marco waiting outside because old habits died hard, preparing a nursery in one of the penthouse bedrooms, arguments about names that lasted weeks before they settled on Sophia for a girl, Michael for a boy. The foundation continued running smoothly with Elena working reduced hours and a staff she trusted to handle day-to-day operations. Lorenzo's businesses thrived with him focusing on legitimate ventures and leaving the dangerous stuff firmly in the past. Castellano's donation funded 3 new programs, and his name on the donor list raised eyebrows but no serious objections. Their life wasn't perfect. Elena still had nightmares sometimes about the warehouse standoff. Lorenzo still struggled with the impulse to solve problems with force instead of negotiation. They fought about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes and serious things like how to handle Lorenzo's former associates who occasionally reached out. But they fought honestly, loved fiercely, and built something real out of what had started as pretense. Sophia arrived on a Tuesday in spring, 6 pounds of screaming perfection with Lorenzo's dark hair and Elena's determined expression. Lorenzo cried, holding her for the first time. This man who'd faced down armed enemies without flinching, completely undone by his daughter's tiny fingers wrapped around his. Elena watched him with their daughter and felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't known was unsettled. This was what healing looked like, what hope felt like, what it meant to build a life instead of just survive one. That night, with Sophia sleeping in the hospital bassinet and Lorenzo dozing in the chair beside Elena's bed, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a woman being humiliated at a gala to a mother, wife, and foundation director. From invisible to seen. From alone to partnered with someone who'd burn the world for her. It had started with a lie. Lorenzo claiming she was his wife when they were strangers. But somewhere between that moment and this one, the lie had become truth. They were partners. They were family. They were everything they'd promised to be at that wedding, and more than Elena had ever imagined possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "She's beautiful. You're beautiful. So proud of you." Elena smiled and typed back, "Thanks. Still can't believe this is my life." "Believe it. You earned it." Had she? Elena wasn't sure. Felt more like she'd stumbled into something extraordinary and had been smart enough not to run when it got complicated. But maybe that was earning it. Choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. Choosing love when logic said to protect herself. Choosing to build instead of just endure. Lorenzo stirred, eyes opening to find Elena watching him. "What are you thinking about? How far we've come? How much has changed?" Elena's voice was soft so as not to wake Sophia. "How grateful I am that you were at that gala." "Best night of my life," Lorenzo said, "even though I terrified you." "You did. Still do sometimes," Elena smiled, "but I love you anyway." "I love you too, both of you." Lorenzo stood, crossing to press a kiss to Elena's forehead, then Sophia's. "My girls. My whole world." It was sappy and romantic and probably would have made Elena cringe a year ago. Now it just made her heart full. They'd started with a lie that became truth. Built a marriage on honesty even when it was ugly. Created a family out of 2 broken people who decided being broken together was better than being whole alone. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no happily ever after, just happily right now, and the promise to keep choosing each other tomorrow and the day after that. But for Elena, who'd spent so long just trying to survive, happy right now was more than enough. It was everything. She looked at Lorenzo holding their daughter, at the city glittering beyond the hospital window, at the life they'd built from chaos and danger and one impulsive declaration at a charity gala. "She's my wife," Lorenzo had said to a room full of strangers. And somehow, impossibly, He'd been telling the truth before either of them knew it. Elena Ward had walked into that ballroom invisible and walked out claimed by a man who made the city hold its breath. She'd become Elena DeLuca not through circumstance but through choice, had built a foundation that mattered, a marriage that worked, and a family that was wholly, completely theirs. The girl who'd given her lunch to a homeless man had become a woman who ran a multi-million-dollar foundation. The woman who'd been humiliated at a gala had become someone people respected. The wife who'd started as pretense had become the truest thing in Lorenzo's life. And as Elena drifted towards sleep, Sophia's soft breathing mixing with Lorenzo's quiet humming, she thought about how sometimes the best things in life start with a lie that becomes true. How sometimes the most dangerous choice is the right one. How sometimes loving someone who terrifies you is exactly what you need to become who you're meant to be. She was Elena DeLuca now. Wife, mother, foundation director, partner to a man who'd kill for her and live for her and choose her every single day. Not bad for a girl who'd started the year just trying to survive a hostile workplace and make rent. Not bad at all.